Here.
Stand for the pledge, please. I pledge allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Are there any additions, deletions, withdrawals to the agenda?
Yes.
Um,
Yes.
Either one? I don't care.
Either or. Commissioner Samaria can go first.
Commissioner Samaria.
I would like to change my 12F because it should have read this, and I'm learning at this. But anyway, it should have read that I would like to change the update from item 12 to read the pros and cons to use in the code review board, and the pros and cons to use in an outside company to do the driveway ordinance. And then I also have a discussion in reference to the minutes. I know it's about a summary and that it's a summary because when we get to the minutes, I have a couple problems.
Can you take it up in the minutes rather than adding a special agenda item, if that would be okay?
Say that again?
Take it up during the minutes because...
Oh, that's fine.
Okay.
That's right. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
I have one addition and one deletion. Would like to add a proclamation for Black History Month.
Can we do that as right in front of presentations? Or-
Absolutely.
Okay.
And then the deletion is (12E), the purchase of police radios.
That's being polled?
That's been full. Yeah.
Okay. Okay. Black History Month. Whereas Black History Month, we celebrate the many achievements and contributions made by African Americans to our economical, cultural, spiritual, and political development as a nation. And whereas African Americans have played a central role in our nation's history, however much of that has been accomplished has remained unrecognized and uncelebrated. Whereas within the events of Black History Month, we seek to teach our children that American story was written by men and women of every race, and that all stories will be continued to be told through the lives that they themselves live. And whereas Black History Month reminds us of the struggles and the personal sacrifices of African Americans and honors the great imprint they have made upon our country's landscape, and the Village of Biscayne Park recognizes Black Lives Matters in Biscayne Park, past, present, and future. We are committed to sustaining and creating African American participation, visibility, and engagement in every aspect of our village's culture. We extend an open heart, open mind, and open door principles. Our village commitment is to inclusion and diversity to every African American citizens in Biscayne Park, now and the years to come. Thank you. Okay, we're going to begin with presentations. Police Department, Chief, Commander, and Manager.
Good evening, everyone. Tonight I'm going to do a PowerPoint presentation that will give the state of the police department during the 2017-2018 calendar year. The importance of this presentation is to institute open lines of communication, transparency, and an insight on police operations. I will be going over statistical data tonight that provides analytical information that helps us identify patterns, issues, locations, and the use of resource management. Nonetheless, it is imperative that everyone understands that the statistical data is not a constant and it fluctuates with changing trends. An example of this is that you can have 0 incidents an entire year and 1 incident can skew your numbers the following year. The police department uses the statistical data not to measure success or failure, but as a tool to implement real-time policing. With that being said, let me get into our 2018 goals and objectives. Last year, we implemented goals and objectives, and we used the acronym RESTORE. We wanted to restore integrity, transparency, and professionalism back into the police department. The R on the RESTORE was meant to accomplish relationship building, both internal and external. E for employee development, S for superior service delivery, T for technology, O for operational transparency, R for resource management, and E for ethics and diversity. In 2018, using these goals, we accomplished the following. We implemented zone patrolling for officers. We implemented east and west zones. This allowed for superior service delivery and also accountability. We implemented a village resource officer program, which helped relationship building within the village. We implemented a village park officer, which also helped us build relationships. We had training conducted by Florida International University that helped develop our employees. We added an additional motorcycle, giving us 2 motorcycles to address the traffic issues, superior service delivery. We added and implemented signs in the medians for no parking, share the road signs, no through truck signs. That helped us build relationships with our community. We implemented an internal affairs officer that allowed for transparency within our police department. We had FDLE come in and audit our property unit. That allowed for transparency. We automated our police records. Yes, I'm going to repeat that. This year, we automated all of our records in the police department for 2018, and now we're working on 2017 and 2016. We did that in the last 6 months. Technology and transparency. We instituted a part-time police officer program, which we started with 3 and now we're up to 6. We revamped the police station to ensure that we could provide superior services, and we have the needed resources and tools there for us to do the job. We brought in a company for fleet management, Enterprise, so they can better manage our vehicles. We had AT&T, we changed our contract and we implemented AT&T in our First Net program, which allows us to have a priority and access when communications go down during a critical incident or a major natural disaster. Next. Okay, you did. We did internal restructuring, organizational overhaul of the department, resource management. We recruited veteran officers throughout Dade County to ensure superior service delivery. We recruited a criminal investigation expert to ensure that we were able to clear cases and solve cases, superior service delivery. The correct way, let me add that. Recruitment and records retention manager. That was for technology and superior services. We worked with the Federal Bureau of Investigation and case resolution. We work with the Miami-Dade County State Attorney's Office in case resolution for transparency. We work with the Miami-Dade Public Defender's Office on a name clearing task force, transparency. We digitized all our records, all forms, and all reports, technology. We built relationships with events like the Halloween event, the Winterfest, and our back to school and child safety event, relationship building. To give you an overview of the personnel that we have in our department currently, we now have gone from 5 reserve officers to 24. We have now 6 part-time officers. We had 0 before. 7 full-time officers. We have 1 police clerk, 1 outstanding phenomenal commander, not because he's next to me, and the chief of police. We have a total of 39 officers in our department. That changed from 11. The next slide gives you an overview of the personnel, where they're working and what they're doing within the organization. 2017, these are the 2017-2018 FDLE Uniform Crime Report statistics. As you can see, you have murder, rape, robbery, aggravated assault, violent crime rate. And the next category, you have burglary, larceny, motor vehicle, property crime rate, and the index. As you could see, if those who can't, we excelled in all categories, and for violent crimes, we were able to reduce violent crime within our village by 45%. And the property crime offenses of burglary, larceny, motor vehicles, and other property crimes, we were able to reduce crime by 34%. And basically, our strategy is to flood the streets with police presence and appropriate patrolling. Next slide. This slide, if you look at the data, this was the 2016-2017 UCR report. If you go down to the second to last line, you'll see it says Biscayne from the bottom. It'll say Biscayne Police Department, and the index rate will show that last year we were +6 in crime. This year we're -34. The next slide, please. Traffic statistics. We issued 583 non-moving violations, 597 moving violations, 294 speeding violations.
497.
497. 294 speeding violations. Thank you, Ms. Mann. 51 criminal violations, and we handled 28 traffic accidents. How do they compare to 2017, which is what you're probably asking yourself? In 2017, we had 674 non-moving violations compared to 2018, 583. But for moving violations, which is the area of most concern in the village, we increased to 497 violations from 382. Speedy violations were comparable. We went from 304 to 294, and then criminal violations from 120 to 51. Overall, there was a reduction in roughly a little bit under 60 violations difference. Traffic accidents were comparable, 27 we had last year to 28 this year. I want everyone to keep in mind that during this time period, we were dealing with the numerous federal investigations, and we were restructuring the department. So these numbers, in my perspective, it shows that the outstanding work the men and women continue to do out here, and making sure we provide great services. Traffic breakdown, I just went over them. You were not moving, speeding, and criminal violations. Our 2019 goals are the following. We want to institute a general police notification system. We want to institute a natural disaster warning notification system. We want to implement, with the assistance of the residents, a pet registry. We want to implement a critical incident notification system. We want to continue and hopefully complete the public records digitizing system. We want to increase the reserve program to 30+ officers. We want to implement squad leaders for the reserve program. We're going to continue working with the Federal Bureau of Investigations and obtain civil rights training. We're going to work with the Public Defender's Office in order to have diversity training for our officers. We're working with the Public Works Department, the manager, the residents, and the commission in implementing traffic control and traffic calming devices.
I'm sorry, Chief, that's all the Public Safety Advisory Board as well?
And
Just
thank you
sure.
for bringing that to my
I
attention,
don't
and the
wanna-
public safety, so which I attend. We wanted to continue to provide crisis intervention training to our officers, radar training to our officers, critical incident management training, and general training. My final thoughts for tonight is for the residents. Please report all suspicious criminal activities to 911. Many times we have people just calling the station, and by the time we respond or we're able to get out there, usually there's a lapse in time. Lock vehicle doors, so you secure your firearms and valuables inside your home. Register your email and phone number with the police department. I'm going to just say it out loud. The email for that registration, we can provide that at a later time, is sandra.rollman@biscayneparkpolice.org. Register your pets. Please secure your homes. And register your information in case of critical incidents and natural disaster notifications. These are just some slides of the different events we've participated in this year. As you can see, this is the safety event at the park. Next. Next. This is the Halloween. Next. 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 This is how I've implemented a protocol here. Before any event, before any important thing, we do an official roll call. I do a briefing, and after, when the event is over, I do a debriefing, so we can have an understanding what we did right, what we did wrong, how can we improve. These are our new 2 bikes. So this is proof that we have it, and our bicycle officers. And next, this is the winter separation right there. That concludes my presentation.
Thank you so much, Chief. Are there any questions from the commissioners? Commissioner Samaria?
I just want to make a comment. I appreciate the chief putting together this, because I think this is what the residents need to see, the stuff that you accomplish. I hope we can do this like every 6 months or whatever time frame you think is worth doing it. But I think this is very helpful to the residents. And this is going to be on the website, right? Okay. That's just congratulations on it. A lot of this stuff I didn't know that you accomplished. So,
Thank you. Any other commissioners? Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Appreciate all the hard work. Great job. The next presentation is financial report. Manager?
We have Paul Winkelton with GMS to take us through that.
Thank you. I have a brief overview for the December 31 financials. The magic of December 31, of course, is our first quarter, so we'll call it the quarter poll for those of you who like maybe horse racing or something along those lines. We got a long way to go to finish the race for the year, but it's the first turn. Gives you a little bit of an idea of how you're headed for the year. In Dade County, we were fortunate to receive the ad valorem funding a little earlier than usual. As you all remember, we have that first quarter gap, October, November, and December, with no revenue from 2019 to match those expenses. So a couple weeks earlier out of the county pockets into our pockets is always good. So we're happy to report that we're at a little over 80% collected on ad valorem, which is, again, better than normal. It's usually a little slower than that. My slide basically just shows you an overview of the December 31 financials. As you may recall, we started the year with a little over $540,000 from prior years. That matched with our FEMA money, which we expect to get sometime soon, hopefully, would bring us back up to the $1.2, $1.3 million reserves, which is an appropriate level. I like to look at reserves as about 1 full year of ad valorem for your community. That's a good benchmark to shoot for, and you should be there hopefully this time next year. Your first quarter revenue, like I said, is tracking slightly ahead, and that's because we take a 95 percentile of the revenue, so we expect that to be ahead, which is good. Expenses were also tracking about $120,000 ahead of budget, which again is about what we hoped it to be. We build a conservative number, and we're doing fairly well. I also took a moment on this slide to show, to give people a sense of that first quarter operating. You have what I call a burn rate. You have a revenue of about $250,000 every month if you were to divide it out, but you have a burn rate of about $211 every month. And these are good orders of magnitude in our head as managers and as residents, so that when we see an anomaly, we know to look for it. It's just a good tool to look at your burn rate. And also that first quarter operating is meaningful, because if you don't have it, you can't write the checks. So inside the financials, I did highlight for the actual financials, I highlighted a number of items for everyone, but the greater, more interesting and meaningful items I've isolated, and I'll talk about them. The first two are insurance related. Your insurance numbers are tracking ahead of budget for a couple reasons, and it's twofold, so it's a little bigger picture when you only look at 3 months worth. The flood insurance is paid in full at the beginning of the year, so when you use a straight monthly proration, when you divide your expenses in your revenue by 12, you get 1/12. But if you pay the whole bill in 1 month, it looks funny. That's part of it. The second part is the liability insurance. The bill comes in late September, and as a result, your 2019 budget is already approved, and it was built on last year's actuals with a small increase to last year's amount that did not match what the actual bill was. And because of that, you are going to have about a $23,000 shortage in those budgeted lines. That prompted me to do a couple things. One is to review all the allocations, make sure that inside their bill the allocations matched the increase, to make sure there wasn't one department that had a greater liability than the others. We're still going to verify that, just to make sure that the numbers are right. And the lesson learned is to just go ahead and anticipate about a 10% increase this time next year, in about 6 months when we wrap up our budget. When we do that, this won't happen again. And so we'll have a better allocation. It's not a huge amount of money in scale, but it's every dollar matters when you're making decisions, so what to buy, what not to buy. So we'll get that right. The only other thing I could think of is to pester our insurance department, or the provider of our insurance, to give us an indicator as early as possible. That would be more helpful. And sometimes they do that. I use FMIT and other clients, and they're not really easy to get information in advance, but we'll try. There is a positive in that, is that you did have a couple of vehicles that will be going off of your insurance, so there'll be a little bit of savings there. So that $23,000 should go down to about $20,000. The last item that is a something to monitor and has high managerial input. And I noticed that the chief. No, he's still here. Good, I can get him. He's hiding in the back. No, an innovative program that was adopted was to identify the value of using part-time officers versus full-time officers in an overtime capacity. Obviously, there's a premium in overtime. We eliminate that with a part-time officer. It's valuable. Our contract, collective bargaining agreement, allows for 50% of the department or less to be part-time. So that innovation was netted out as a savings throughout this year. Unfortunately, when you start a program like that, the part-time officers are not immediately able to offset the overtime, and the chief can answer this if you need to, but I think you'll get it from my comment that it takes a couple months to get the traction. So those couple months are behind us. The first month was much worse. The second month better, and again the third month it's gone down to just about $8,000 or $9,000 in anticipated benefit not being there. By another, when we do the mid-year poll, we should see either an equalization or a success. Those are managerial. There are buttons, there are controls that the department heads can handle in this, and I know he knows this, and you guys should be fine. The one thing about to the police department's reality check is it's an inelastic world. They do not get revenue to match their expenses. So when they have really bad days, you just get expenses. That's just the nature of police work. They have more overtime, they have longer hours, etc., because of storms or whatever emergencies take place, or just a uptick in activity, which you just saw is going in the right direction. So all that said, we watch the police department very, very carefully from a financial perspective, because it doesn't have a lot of opportunity to make changes inside. You're not going to cut down on police patrols and et cetera. So what we do and what I will recommend to the manager is if I see 3 months from now a continued trend, we will sit down and we will identify other managerial efforts that you can't make within the police department but might be found elsewhere. So that's a quick overview, or not a quick, but it's the overview of where you are at the first quarter poll. Where you were this time last year was significantly different because we didn't have 2 complete audits behind us that were completely, that were solid facts. We don't have 1 whole budget cycle behind us, which we have now. So I'm very confident that you're tracking well, and congratulations on your first quarter.
Thank you so much. Are there any questions from the commissioners?
Not really a question.
Vice Mayor?
Just a comment on getting the first quarter highlight. I do like that you provided this breakdown, and I'm just wondering, in the future, when you do this, if it could be in advance so that the community also can see this type of breakdown, because we're all not CPAs, and for transparency, I
Right.
want the residents to be able to understand what's happening in the budget in kind of like a nice bite-sized piece. So-
Yes, I plan to do the two things I did this time. I plan to do all at once. This one came a little late because I really didn't think of it, frankly, but I did at the last minute and got it to you. But what I did was I took the whole financials and I gave you a highlight with a comment from the finance manager. I sent it to the manager. The manager can edit and add to my comments, and then we'll send that around as a PDF. That's every line item and every item. And then this, of course, is what I think simplifies the concept. I pull out the ones that I think are financially meaningful, meaning that you need to do something or not do something, or if somebody brings it up to me and says, "Hey, Paul, this looks kind of funny. What are we doing?" I'll answer it, but I don't want to, you don't need to have 15 pages explaining 16 pages of information.
Right.
So I try to keep it to one.
Commissioner Samara.
With this financial stuff, is this put on the website to where residents can see it? It is?
It is, yes. Our website has been behind, and we've caught that up for the most part. I don't think December's on there yet, but we will post that and add this first quarter financial overview as well.
Yeah, and my personal calendar is set up now with Sharon, your accountant, to crunch. She cranks out the current month financials right after the bank statements come. It's usually like the 10th or 12th of the month. She gets it in that week. If she gets with our other clients all having the same timing, she gets it done that week for you all, just like everybody. Then I see it on that Monday, which is a week before it needs to go for your agenda. So that gives me a couple days with my schedule, go through it, confer with Christian and department heads, and then get it to you. So I've got it set up. As long as I don't get sick or go on a trip, I can do it that way perfectly. And I don't get sick too often. So.
And I just wanted to say thank you, because it's so nice to be able to have a tool now that we can manage the
You
money
can see
on
where
a
I'm
regular
going.
basis.
These notes will build the notes for the budget. It should flow together.
And thanks for the cover sheet. Anybody else? Chief?
Just want to, for the record, clarify, I've had many discussions with the manager, with the finance director, regarding the overages in that specific category. So just to give you a little overview, because I think it's important. So during the month of October, we had the Halloween activity here, which we fully staffed it for the Halloween event, and we brought additional officers for that. We also went through with the training with FIU, which you had to bring everybody in order to get that required training that we had to do. We had the Winterfest parade, which we fully staffed. In New Year's, we had out here 6 officers. In the past, you've had 1. So we fully staffed the village to ensure with reserve officers and with part-time officers to ensure that there were no issues during New Year's. We did all the digitizing during that time period. And also, as we all know, we went through a period of the investigation portion, which concluded in December with the final sentencings. And we had to do a voluminous amount of public records for both the State Attorney's Office, the Federal Bureau of Investigations, and the Public Defender's Office. So all of that was done in addition to what we do every day. So I just want to give you a little bit of an overview of how the money was spent, and we're back on track. And I tell the manager this and the staff that without a doubt, I'm a firm believer. And we just added, with the part-time positions, we just went away from one full-time position. This is going to save the village an enormous amount of money and still have more resources and better services. You're going to have less unfunded liabilities. In the future, you won't have the pension costs. You won't have all the other costs associated with some of these long-term employees. In addition to, if you look at the category of overtime, it is like Paul, the finance director said, or the finance manager said, that the overtime is drastically coming down. The part-time officers, after 80 hours, which has never occurred, they would then begin to get overtime. At this point, we're not even close. We're not even past 25. So we're right on track where we want to be. The vision, the goals, the objectives we want to meet, we're there. So that's just to give you a little overview how the money was spent. These were just critical months. Okay.
Thank you very, very much for that.
Thank you.
Okay, all comments, I'm going to be reading the decorum rules, which was voted on last meeting. All comments must be addressed to the commission as a body and not to individuals. Any person making impertinent or slanderous remarks or who becomes boisterous while addressing the commission shall be barred from further audience before the commission by a proceeding officer unless permission to continue or again address the commission is granted by the majority vote of the commission members present. No clapping, applauding, heckling, or verbal outbursts in support or in opposition to a speaker or his or her remarks shall be permitted. No signs or placards shall be allowed to the commission chambers. Please mute or turn off your cell phones or pagers at the start of the meeting. Failure to do so may result in being barred from the meeting. Persons exiting the chamber shall do so quietly. With that, open for public comments. You have 3 minutes. Thank you.
Linda Dillon, 712 115th Street. In the nearly 40 years that I have been attending commission meetings, disharmony and rancor have often been the norm. Residents have repeatedly stood at the podium and asked that commissioners set aside differences among themselves and that we as residents be equally treated with respect and dignity, even when there was lack of agreement with what was being said or done. At one point, residents were allowed to express anything, and for however long it took to express frustrations, disenchantment, or even on occasion, approval. I found the behavior demonstrated at last month's meeting toward residents, and particularly toward former Commissioner Ross, to be so rude and disheartening to the point that I submitted a revision for the decorum statements. While I believe that no decorum statements have ever been approved, I believe that all such statements should apply to everyone and not just residents. I want to thank Commissioner Samaria for being the only one to respond to my message and for placing this item on the agenda for discussion. Decorum statements aside, you were all urged to work with each other and with our manager and staff to find solutions to village issues. The opinions of residents and our comments, whether positive, negative, on topic or not, should also be considered. Hear us out and make us proud instead of ashamed. Remember that you were elected to represent us. It is no wonder that more residents do not come to these meetings.
Thank you, Linda. Anybody else for public comments?
Janie Anderson, 11th Place and 119th Street. What really stands out to me in terms of this current heavy-handed obsession with decorum is how clearly one-sided it is. We're told how to behave. We can't even address you guys individually, and we're threatened with expulsion if we cross the line. But yet, regularly, there are comments made from the dais that are critical of residents, and the fact that we may not be mentioned by name, makes those comments no less offensive. The December and January meetings were the latest and possibly the most egregious examples, even at one point accusing us of wasting time with our public comments, our only chance to speak. We should be free to speak to whatever topic we so choose, and we should not be the ones to be accused, as we were that night also, of causing 4 and 5 hour meetings. But yet, while all this was going on, none of the rest of you defended residents. And we, of course, can't defend ourselves or we'll be threatened with being expelled. Then, of course, there was the agenda item backup. Ironically, what could have been a really positive item. Instead, it was loaded with dismissive, snarky remarks, gratuitous at best. It was like, okay, here's one more opportunity for a resident smackdown. You know, if you guys can't police yourselves, if you continue to engage in verbal sparring matches with residents, if you can't keep the simplest campaign promises. I mean, what was it that sign said? Positivity, inclusiveness, listen to residents. If you didn't realize that this job that you all willingly signed up for required a thick skin because criticism is all part of it, if you don't realize that when a resident gets up here or sends you an email, it doesn't matter what the topic is. It's not a waste of time, and it's not trivial, or we wouldn't take the time to communicate. But it is part of your job to be responsive. You know, strong, secure leaders are encouraged by challenges and criticisms. They don't feel the need to stifle it. And yes, you're here to do village business, but we as the residents, we drive that business.
Thank you, Janie.
Barbara Kuehl, 111th Street. I agree with everything Linda Dillon said and Janie, so I'm not going to repeat that. You know, I honestly, when I heard there was going to be a police report, it was like, you know, another police report. But I'll tell you something, I was really impressed. And the reason I was so impressed was because since the chief took over, he has set goals, and he's had results. He's measuring things. There's a clear focus. We have a new public works manager, David Hernandez, and I've worked with him on several occasions. He also, the minute he took over, would assess situations and was already talking about how he was going to improve the village. And he's been doing it. And things have moved forward. And you have a lot of things on the agenda that you all know how I feel. So I probably don't even have to comment. But the one thing, the most disappointing thing right now, and for a long time, is that I feel that this administration, our manager, does not really have goals. I feel that when it's budget time, nothing comes out. The people propose different things, the commissioners have different things, but we don't have any goal as a village. We have medians that need help. We have a million different things, and yet we have projects that people, like, for example, the foundation had a project, a fundraising project that's going on now. They want to raise money for bricks, and they're going to, something has to be done to figure out where these bricks are going to go. Nothing's been done. Month after month, this is going on for a year. There's been nothing from our manager, nothing from the commission. Not that it's really the commissioner's place to do this. You know, the commission sets policy. And when I was looking at the different priorities that were sent and the different ideas, I realized this is a total waste of time. The manager should have background to ideas that we could do, not pathways, things that can never happen, sidewalks. We're wasting valuable time. And before I run out of time, one of the priorities you brought up at one of the meetings was about sewers. And in a matter of 10 seconds, you somehow decided to go on this path for trying to get funding for $70 million in sewers. In 10 minutes, This isn't in our comp plan. No one had discussed this before. In all the meetings I go to, I've never heard of
I'm sorry.
sewers.
If you could, if you could just finish up, please. Thank you. Go ahead. Take a few more seconds.
It is not responsible for you to bring up something like sewers and go with it and list that as a priority. In the documentation that you have to do for the state, it says, is there any documentation show of support for the requested project in the community, including public hearings, letters of support, the other things like that? When was that ever done? How can you really go forward with that? And with a $70 million budget?
Thank you.
Chuck Ross, 11166 Griffin Boulevard. First, I want to commend the police department. Great job, Chief, Nick. And I don't think we've ever had the experience. I know we've never had the type of experience we have in our new chief, so everybody should be very proud. At the last commission meeting, I was stopped from speaking. And I want to complete some of the things I wanted to say. The proper place for a discussion of BP issues is at a BP Commission meeting. At the last meeting, I was prevented from completing my complete statement to the public in front of the Commission by the mayor. During the meeting, a discussion about decorum was brought up. Commissioner Dan Samaria had added an item about the placement at the top of the agenda versus the bottom of the agenda. It was suggested by a member of the Commission that the decorum rules be posted on the podium. I would suggest that the Citizen Bill of Rights be posted in front of the commissioners. The Citizens Bill of Rights, among other things, provides for the right of us to be heard. Also included in the Citizen Bill of Rights is a requirement in truth in government. I'm going to read that to you. Truth in government. No village official or employee shall knowingly furnish false information on any public matter, nor knowingly omit significant facts when giving requested information to the members of the public. In reviewing the paperwork submitted in connection with the legislative request that was done on August 27th of 2017, I located the following emails. August 27th, from Tracy Trutman to Christian Manners, copying the lobbyist. Subject: roadways project funding request. Dear Christian and Dave, please see the attached funding request in the House Appropriations Forum. Dave, I'll ask Dr. I hope I'm saying his name, Blotcher, to review prior to submission after you both review for content. Thank you for your input and assistance. Best regards, Tracy. A few days later, we got an email back from going from Christian to Dave saying that the attached request for funding from the edits you and I discussed over the phone are hunky-dory, let's call it. And the people that were involved in this email are Dave Caserta, our lobbyist, Tracy Trutman, our mayor, and Christian Manners, our manager. We were informed by Mayor Trutman when this came up that the reason that we didn't have a public hearing about this was because of Hurricane Irma. So this request was sent 10 days to 2 weeks before Hurricane Irma occurred. That's a concern. And that was one of the things that I wanted to discuss. And, you know, my objective in the prior meeting was that the commission take this up. I don't want to take this anywhere else, but for the commission to discuss this. Thank you.
Thank you, Chuck.
Hello, Dan Keys. Just want to talk about 2 or 3 things on the agenda. There's going to be a discussion about the use of CITT funds, and just want to say there's extensive history regarding pathways in the village, and for good reason. The idea of pathways was determined to be impractical in most cases. There were several routes, specifically the one from the rec center to this bus station back here, that were discussed, and those previous discussions should be well understood before moving forward. And if you choose to go forward on any of this, certainly investigate the previous commission action and discussions regarding this issue. With regard to driveways, I still hope that you consider hiring a professional specifically experienced with writing codes of this type, and that may or may not be the firm we have on call. Regarding the traffic calming recommendations that you are going to be discussing, of particular concern to me are the proposals to place non-asphalt speed cushions, I think that means speed bumps, in the village. There should be public disclosure of any plans in advance of this process for approval by those most impacted, and an approval process by those that might be specifically impacted by their installation in the future. This would, of course, be in addition to any county process that's in place to approve this type of thing. And certainly in the end, if they are used in the village, I hope that they're used sparingly. I would add that, on top of all of that, and with all due respect to the police department and the work that's happened this year, which is awesome, I still like to see targeted police efforts focused on specific locations that are problematic in the village that we know about, and we got to figure out how to catch people doing the wrong thing at those locations as part of this whole process. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
David Raymond, 11520 Northeast 9th Avenue. Commissioners, staff, Chief, Nick. First of all, great job with the police presentation, not just what you did, but also the presentation itself. And I know at least on 9th Avenue, I'm out with the dog at least an hour and a half a day, maybe 2 hours, between the morning and the afternoon. And I see officers on 9th Avenue constantly, and I've seen a lot of flashing lights lately and people being pulled over, and I'm not saying that's always a good thing. If you're the one getting pulled over, I guess it's not, but I think that's great. And I also think that the rates, when it comes to burglary rates and all these other things, I mean, in the past we've constantly seen something about a car getting broken into, a house getting broken into. Thank God, I mean, everything seems to be going well. I know you changed up the zones and all that. So congratulations, not just to you, but also to Christian, because I know Christian, he's not doing this all by himself. And I think, we've been here now, it'll be 4 years in April. And so I haven't been here as long as some of the folks here who've been through many, many more commission meetings. But I know when I first got here, looking at the budgets and looking at some of the things that were presented, and I'd ask questions of the former budget manager back when, and was just not good, to put it mildly. And I think that there's been a lot of work and a lot of systems that have been in place here over the last couple years. And congratulations, Christian, on the things that have happened well. And I think finally we really have good staff to support all of the work that has to be done around here. So I know that we still need some work on communication here with everybody. I'm not discounting that, but I do want to congratulate everybody on the things that have been happening in a good way. Thank you.
Thank you so much, David.
Fred Jonas, 918 119th Street. Just really a general comment, not about the agenda tonight, but it's not an uncommon thing to hear people talk about what's referred to as the residents, as if there was a difference between the residents and the commission. And I just wanted to point out that there are some of us who are so-called the residents who used to be commissioners, and some of us who were so-called the residents who will be commissioners in the future, and all of us who are commissioners now who didn't used to be, and all of us who are commissioners now that won't be commissioners in the future. We're all residents. We all live here. We just have a system. It's in the charter, and it says that for certain kinds of decisions, we have a commission of 5 people, and they make the decisions. But there's nothing else special about them. We're all the same. We're all residents.
Thank you, sir.
Hi, good evening. Maud Boyzak, 11001 Northeast 9th Avenue. I just wanted to get more insight in regards to the finance report, because my question is how didn't we see the 10% year-over-year in-trend increase coming? Did something happen or change? And also, I personally don't quite agree that we should just account for another 10% increase for next year, because at that pace, what's going to be the bill in 5 years? Should we instead probably give ourselves the opportunity to do some market research and open a bidding process? Because at the end of the day, it's always going to reflect on our taxes if we don't look at it seriously. And I personally believe that we should focus in cost reduction rather than just accepting this year-over-year increase as a fact. So I don't know. I'm just willing to discuss that. And then in regards to driveway, I was pretty pleased with the workshop we had. However, I personally don't believe, again, that going with a third party to draft the ordinance will lead us anywhere. Hiring this company and definitely telling them what to do is kind of biased to me. The first question we should ask a consulting company, if we had to hire any, is if the code compliant was to be fully applied, which is currently not, do we need to force our resident to upgrade any part of their property? My understanding was that we would look back at the 2015 ordinance as a starting point, and that is not so restrictive and intrusive as the one we currently have drafted. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Any other public comments?
Good evening, Rox Ross, 11166 Griffin Boulevard. Unfortunately start off with a sad note. I learned this afternoon that longtime resident of Miami Shores, Herta Holly, passed away last night. She served as mayor and councilperson for several terms. She lived a long and happy life. She was 82 years old, but it's always hard when you lose someone. Herta was kindness personified. She was a force of nature when she needed to in order to achieve her goals. She worked for many years as an educator and in administration with the Cushman School, where she encouraged and touched many young lives, and she'll be missed in many of the communities that she served. I also came to speak to you tonight primarily about the Pelican Harbor Seabird Station. And I ask for your support for this local nonprofit and reinforcing our commitment to preservation of the environment and wildlife by contributing to the PHSS annual Pelican Party fundraiser, which is coming up in August. Last year, I was fortunate to gain the agreement of council to donate a silent auction item by way of a certificate of use for this space, as if it were a rental. And they did put it onto their silent auction table. Unfortunately, they were not able to raise funds for it, but they were able to enjoy it for their holiday party in December. And I've spoken to Chris Boykin, who heads up Pelican Harbor, and he is willing to promote the village as a sponsor for their event if we are able to repeat that generous donation again this year. So I ask you to please consider that, possibly at this meeting, so that they can get their paperwork and advertising in order and also name the village as a sponsor. Just a couple of other items while I still have a second. The CITT items, there are two items that refer to CITT. Just wanted, when you talk about the road work and infrastructure, which is in, I think, item 11A, one of the things that we were able to do when we were pursuing funding for the log cabin was every time the Tallahassee gave us feedback, we would adjust our request the next year in order to address those. And I know that Governor Scott, in his veto message, criticized the ask because he perceived it as avoiding the Department of Transportation's normal process. So we have to find a way to sort of circumvent or defeat that shooting down of the request for that purpose. And I hope that you include something that would address those comments so we don't get the same turn down. On the CITT allocations with the sidewalks and the bike path, the other item, the only thing I have to add is, well, there wasn't much of a plan, so I couldn't comment on what is being proposed, but the one thing that I would ask is that whatever plan you decide, that you do it in such a way so that it is sustainable by the annual revenue that is dedicated to transit for CITT, and we don't have to bite into general fund money.
Thank you very much. Any further public comments?
Hello. Ernesto Oliva, 10 Avenue, 11709. I'm kind of happy to hear that we're talking about speed bumps. As we know, 10 Avenue, 11 Place, 9 are very critical for us, and we cannot have police all the time. It would be great if we can have some speed bumps there, for sure. That would be great. Safety and peace and everything would be great. Of course, some people don't like it because they don't live on those avenues and they are safe, right? But basically for everybody it would be a plus because we can walk freely and nicely and we don't have to be chasing people or crashes or anything like that. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
MacDonald Kennedy, 11705 Northeast 11th Place. For those of you who I have not met, I'm the guy who sent you pictures of the cat worms that were living inside my hand because of the feral cats on my street. So nice to make your acquaintance officially. I was happy to see, is the chief? Yes, there you are. I was happy to see the police report. Thank you for that. I would like to see a significant increase in speeding tickets. I think we could go a long way there. Those numbers were actually down a little bit. Speaking of which, I'm happy also to see that the, what's the board called? The
Public Safety
Board?
Advisory Board.
That they made some recommendations. I was very disappointed, however, that Northeast 11th Place was not mentioned on there at all. The north-south routes through this town are a real serious cut through, particularly in the mornings, people heading to take their kids to school. And Northeast 11th Place, which I live on, and I spend a lot of time out front gardening, speeding is a really serious issue. It's really, really serious there. There's a blind curve where I live between 117th and 118th that is particularly dangerous, and you know we don't have sidewalks, and there's lots of joggers in the morning, and I'm out there usually with a cup of coffee, pulling weeds. Some of you ride your bike past me and wave as I pull weeds in the morning. So I have a front row seat to what's going on there, and I've seen so many near misses. It's really scary, and I hope that Northeast 11th Place can be addressed on that as well. The driveway workshop that was canceled, I was really disappointed about that, and I sent you guys an email, and only one of you replied, of course, to my email. But not only was I disappointed that the workshop was pushed back, and I had planned a business trip, so I couldn't attend the rescheduled workshop. But I'd like to understand better how these meetings are meant to be changed. Because my understanding was that when a public meeting is announced, it's posted for the public, and I don't know if there's a difference between meetings and workshops and what have you, but that it needs to be canceled in a more formal way than an email from the village manager to residents 6 hours before saying, we changed it, come another day. That was a little too casual for me. I planned my month around that. I sat in this room when you guys determined when that meeting would be. I took my phone out, I put it on my calendar, and I planned my month around it. I planned business trips around it. I missed the meeting. But more importantly than Mac missing the driveway meeting, because you all know my feelings on the driveway ordinance, is that it was just changed. It seemed very arbitrary to me. I'd like to understand what the system is for you guys to change meetings. That seemed a little casual to me. I thought there were rules about that about how that had to be done. And finally, very quickly, this month is our 3rd year in the village. My husband and I moved here 3 years ago. And there is still no vision for this village. There are no goals for anything you're trying to accomplish, and there is absolutely no action plan that you can execute. And that's why we are going nowhere really fast.
Thank you. Any other public comments? Having none, public comments are closed. Manager information updates? None at this time. Consent agenda. Is there a motion on the consent agenda?
And I'd like to talk about a couple items on here.
Okay, just to be clear, I know what I'd like to do, if I may, is just do the balance of the consent, and then we'll take, do you want to poll an item?
Well, the December 4th revised minutes, I want to talk about that.
So poll so you're asking to have them polled, so we'll poll them, okay?
Yeah.
So we'll poll December 4th? Okay, anything else? Is there a motion to approve the balance of the consent?
I'll make a motion to approve the balance of the consent agenda.
Is there a second?
A second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Commissioner Smary, you polled December 4th minutes, so would you like to address?
Question for the minutes. If we're going to be talking about boards given, one of the things I had concern about is that the reports that are given by boards should be given at a reasonable time. Is that another discussion that I have to have, or can I be talking about that in...
You're talking about the time,
Well,
if you're going to poll...
To me, the minutes, the boards are just not given they should be given their minutes 30 days, at least 30 days before, after they're approved by their boards. It just seems like we're having these board minutes being September, October, November, and this is already February. So
Yeah, they're volunteer boards, so I know some of that...
I'm not going to use that as an excuse. I was on a recreation advisory board, and we got our minutes in time when we approved it. It was 30 days after we approved the minutes.
So when you're polling the December 4th, is there something on that specifically
Yeah,
that you're...
it's December 4th, but I'm also talking about in reference to the boards.
Okay. I don't... Do you want to... We'll have to put that as an agenda item at a separate time to do that, if that's okay. Maybe next... We're going to be looking at boards next month anyway, because that's when we always look at boards. You want to put it on then?
Okay.
Put that okay? Okay, thank you. And December 4th, what would you like us to do with that, sir?
No, December 4th, I want to talk about some stuff that was left off there that should have been put on there. To me, minutes should be not a summary. It should be explaining what happened at the meeting. Example 8A happened where we nominated... We nominated Mayor Tracy for nomination, but Commissioner Samaria's nomination for William Tudor was not put on there, and any discussion that the attorney had should have been put into the minutes.
Just, and like clarification, the issue with summary minutes is there was a vote that we would do summary minutes. That is what we've been following. And for summary minutes, it's only for actionable items, but I'm not an expert in this, so I'd like the clerk to, or the manager to address.
No, that is the way we do it. We only do action items typically, and so we don't do the detailed minutes like that.
But that shows me that the minutes are not fully accountable. I mean, we had another nomination. That should have been put in there. We also had a discussion with the city attorney. See, you're saying that everybody can visit at the website. Some people don't visit the website. And for transparency, I think that the minutes should reflect with the discussion. I understand about a summary. You want to sum up the things, but we need to have full disclosure on these things, and stuff that happened in the December 4th meeting are not in this meeting. And that's what it should be.
Should we budget for a transcriptionist for next year?
We have had, I wasn't on the commission, but I think that this was just recently approved. The minutes was always done at the commission meetings to where it was on there. There's a couple commissioners here, I don't want to put them on the spot, that the minutes were done not this way before.
I mean,
we had a transparency of exactly what was on them. I just think that we're leaving stuff out, that's important stuff. Not because it was my particular item, but it should be the discussion that the attorney had in reference to that should have been on there. It's not.
We don't do verbatim minutes. We do just the actionable items on the minutes. So.
And if I may, Commissioner Wise?
Commissioner Samara, there's also a video that has the entire meeting. Transcription's very expensive, but...
We all of a sudden did this. This has been, how many years this village has been around that we have kept minutes? And all of a sudden, I think this is the last two commissions that this was done. that was changed?
No, this summary minutes has been going on for quite a while, but we can look up the ordinance. And Manager Manners, would you be so kind as to look up the ordinance and make sure Commissioner Samari has a copy of that ordinance when that was voted on? Okay, thank you.
Well, then I can't accept that minutes.
Okay,
It's not complete.
we're going to have to take a vote on accepting those minutes,
Okay.
if we may. Is there a motion to accept December 4th minutes?
I move to accept them.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
All those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
All those opposed?
Aye.
Motion passes 3-1. Okay, there are no ordinances, but there's Resolution 2019-01. Village Attorney?
Yes, Mayor. Resolution 2019-01, it's a resolution of the Village Commission of the Village of Biscayne Park, Florida, approving the First Amendment to the Professional Services Agreement between the Village of Biscayne Park and Government Management Services South Florida LLC to provide local government financial services to the Village of Biscayne Park, authorizing the village manager to execute the First Amendment to the Professional Services Agreement and expend budget funds on behalf of the village and providing for an effective date.
Manager Manners?
In 2017, we hired GMS to perform the services of our finance department. They've done an exceptional job in this past year. They've recreated so many records that were incorrect prior. They corrected them, recreated them, managed to do truthful audits and so forth. We did meet with them, or I did meet with them.
I'm sorry, your mic is not working. Can you switch mics with the attorney for now? Yeah, can you switch mics with the attorney for now?
Sure.
Just to make sure it goes on record. Thank you.
In meeting with GMS, and this was prior to budget, we budgeted a 3% increase for them, and that's my recommendation in this.
Okay, thank you.
They've earned certainly that and more.
Thank you. Are there any questions from the commissioners?
No.
Okay, is there a motion to pass Resolution 2019-01?
I'll make a motion to accept it.
Okay, is there a second?
Resolution 2019-01, amendment to GMS agreement.
Thank you. Is there a second to that motion?
I'll second the motion.
All those in favor? Aye. Motion passes 4-0. Okay, now we're under old business. That is an item that I brought up, so if you'll give me 1 minute. Here it is. Okay. On December 19, 2018, Commission approved 4 legislative priorities. Infrastructure projects to include roadways, water, sewer, and drainage at the recommendation of Senator Jason Piso, who was kind enough to attend the meeting. Number 2 was pedestrian and bike pathways. Number 3 was funding for a generator for Village Hall. And number 4 was lighting for the Ed Burke Recreation Center. We had a phone call with Senator Piso regarding the appropriations. Also, we've been talking with our lobbyist, Dave Caserta, regarding the reality of what was recommended to us during that meeting and the realization, I think, from the senator that that was not a viable ask at this point. So one of the things that we did is he made recommendations for a possible start for some of the projects. So the roads is one of the things he suggested putting in as a separate piece. He suggested taking the water and sewer and trying to get some money from FDEP. Our sister city has done that and got about $4 million. Obviously, that's a drop in the bucket. But there was a lot of discussion among, in my outings with other electeds, including our sister city, Miami Shores, also El Portel, and there's other cities that want to get together and see what we can do, because we know that the governor supports moving to sewers. We know that Senator Piso supports moving to sewers, but the issue right now is significant, the ease of getting funding and the practicalities of that. And at that point, we're not quite there yet. And the drainage also goes along with that. So what I was looking for was a recommendation to approve by the commission. Let me back up. Manager, do you want to jump in here about what you ended up doing so you can explain and why you did it?
Sure. After speaking with our lobbyist, Dave Caserta, and the senator, we went ahead and we moved forward with submitting the roads resurfacing, the pedestrian and bike pathways we discussed. We're going to look at CITT funds for that. I believe that's further in here. And then we submitted for funding for a generator and for lighting for the Ed Burke Recreation Center.
Okay, so essentially, for everybody's in full transparency, the roads was submitted basically similar to last year, or did you change anything in it, or?
It was only minor updates. I mean, yeah.
And then the water and sewer, the recommendation was to go to FDEP to look at that. And then for drainage, there was no funding at this point on that issue. For the generator for Village Hall and the lighting for Ed Burke Recreation Center, do you remember the ask on that? Was it 59, I believe?
The total for the lighting and the generator was 59.
Okay. There is one correction I want to make in the public on the back where it talks about costs. If you look where it says item 3 and 4, it should have also said some matching funds, and I think the matching funds was there was also $3,000, I think, for matching funds for the lighting, and that would be in next year's budget, not in this budget. So there basically would end up being around, I think it was a 30%, if I'm correct on that.
I don't know.
I'm trying to remember, but I think it was 30% of matching funds for that project. So we would come up with about 15, if I'm not mistaken, and the remainder, they would give us another $59,000 for the rewiring of the generator for Village Hall, the pad, everything to do, basically the entire generator install, including the gas line, service line. Just wanted to be clear on that, because that was left out here, okay? And so my recommendation is to move forward with the recommended approach by our lobbyists and our representatives for the funding for the legislative priorities. Have staff pursue potential funding opportunities with FDEP for the water and sewer portion of item 1. But as I said before, there's not enough money for water and sewer at this time. We know it's a priority of the governor's, but we haven't seen how that's going to come about. Okay? And that's and last is provide direction to the manager on how to expend the CITT transit funds, which is the next item, so I'm going to hold off on that one because Commissioner Wise has an item on that. But to work with the staff, have the manager and staff work with the county to obtain approval for a pedestrian bike pathway project. If the funds are not permitted to be used on that project, find an alternative that benefits our residents. And that's my recommendations. Are there any questions? No. Are there objections, even a consensus, as to what was done for the appropriations? I know there was timely issues, so you had to submit those by, was it Friday?
Yeah, it had to be in by Friday. So.
Okay.
That was going to be my question as to when that was submitted. And you said there was some minor changes done from the previous submission?
Really, it was just updating, what year, that sort of thing. Nothing substantial. The same amount of funding was requested as last year. And for roads, some of the new stuff, the generator, the lighting for the rec center, that's new this year. And so.
All right.
Are there any other questions? Okay. So with that, can we at least, do we agree that we want the manager to pursue the FDEP looking at water and sewer, at least for a portion of our village? Yes?
Yes.
Yes?
Yes, but I'd also like to add with the water and sewer that moving forward, as we move forward with this, we know that we have the support from the governor and our senator, but I think we need to get education out also to our village and understand what we're doing and how we're moving forward and why we're moving forward to sewers, so it's not some sort of shock as to why we're doing this. Because if the village wasn't, if residents weren't here at the meeting in which Senator Pizzo was here and he's advocating for this, it's going to be a missing piece as to why are we doing this now. So I think that's very important for us to start to talk about how we're going to get this out.
And why it's so essential.
Yeah.
Okay.
Excuse me. Moving forward with this, does our lobbyist think that we have a shot of getting the money?
He was very positive, and so was the senator on the roads resurfacing. and on the other ask. As I say, you never know. Sessions are sessions, and you never know how things are going to go, but he was positive on both allocations.
Okay, with the-
appropriations, excuse me.
Yeah, I'm sorry. Go ahead. With the road surfaces, it also has to do with underneath for as far as the North Miami is concerned. I mean, yeah, North Miami.
No, the water, the sewer, and the drainage are subsurface, and those right now are on hold till we can find a funding source. Where the only funding source we have available, Commissioner, is FDEP, possibly Florida Department of Environmental Protection, may have limited funding. What the senator did say is we are one of the few cities that have the correct size that would be able to apply for that grant. That grant is an 80-20, so you know 80% we would pay for, and 20% is what we'd have to come with matching. Just to give you an idea, there was a $4 million grant given to El Portel for a small portion, but it is quite a lot of hoops to jump through. It is not very simple. I had an extensive conversation with the mayor regarding what they had to do to get that. So I think we should look into it. I'm not suggesting we jump and actually do everything until the manager comes back and tells us what that would entail.
Well, yeah, I mean, our first step is to find an engineering company and do, get them on board like El Portal has done. And then ultimately, I think our original funding would probably be for the study that the government's going, or the
Right,
state's
so they'll
going to
pay for
require.
it. They'll pay for, right, hopefully. They'll pay for the study, right.
No, I was starting just to think logistically as far as we're talking about things that tear up the road, and we're looking for funding for road resurfacing, and then we're dealing with something on the back end for the subsurface or sewers.
Yeah, well, from what I gather, okay, is just going to be what we're going to be tearing up or not tearing up could be a very small portion for a small section of the city to get sewers. It wouldn't be for everybody to go in sewers. There's no money right now allocated for a 70 or anywhere from a 50 to $70 million project. There's just not the money for that. So what we'd end up getting is a very small section of the city. So if we road resurface, it wouldn't necessarily impact the area where the sewers were going. It may or it may not. We could coordinate that.
Okay.
Is that clear?
And Mayor, if I may, the reality too is that we're not going to get immediate funding for this. This is a few years down the road. We're just starting it now, so that a few years down the road, when water tables have risen, we can get ahead of this before septic tanks start to fail. So.
Yeah, just for the public's sake, the goal here is to make sure we don't have septic tank failure, and that we're acting on this proactively as fast as we can with the funding that we can find available. These are enormously expensive capital improvement projects, but they're also terribly important for everybody in the village long term. And that's why the discussion is starting and ensuing. And that's why when Senator DePiso came and got us all excited, I didn't want to say there because I also know there's a matching component with many of these grants. And realistically, a matching component on a $70 million grant is not realistic for us. But I, of course, was not going to, if he was willing to look for money for us, I wasn't about to say no. So, all right.
If we have matching funds, where are we going to get the money to do that?
That's exactly the point. Right. But if the governor is looking and allocating monies, which the governor is, for converting folks to sewers, where that money goes and how it can be accessed and the ease of which it can be accessed, that will be decided in the future. And I'm hopeful that he's moving us in the right direction, the governor, on funding these types of projects. And I'm hoping we'll be on the radar for those funds. Hopeful. I'm not guaranteeing it, just hopeful. Okay. I believe you have the next item. Commissioner Wise is going to be discussing CITT funds. It is item...
Yes, thank you.
For new business, item 12A, COTT allocation.
Yes. Mayor, if I may make a general comment before I discuss this item. I just wanted to respond to some of the public comments and offer, if I could, a mea culpa. I think I came to this dais after suffering a rather bruising election where I felt like I was on the receiving end of a lot of unkindness, and I think I carried resentment into this room, and I apologize for that. And I apologize if I offended anyone or if I appeared to be disrespectful, and I want to make a commitment going forward to be more receptive and kinder. And I would only ask the same from everyone in this room, that we all try to do that. I think while we might not always have common ground, something that we do share is a love for this village and a hope to send it in a positive direction. And sometimes I feel like not everybody is lobbying for the success of all of us sitting on the dais. And I know maybe this isn't the set of faces that you were hoping to see, but we're here, and we're here because we really want to do something good for Biscayne Park and make a difference. And so I only ask that you lobby for our success, because our success is the success of the village, and our failure is the failure of the village. And I know that we all want good things to happen here, and I'm just saying for my part that I will commit to do better and to be a better person. Thank you.
Thank you.
With that being said, just wanted to share that I had an opportunity to meet with our manager and speak to Nestor at CITT about the proposed sidewalk to connect our transit, our bus stops at the southern and north end of the village. Just to clarify, there's no plan in place, nothing's been decided or going forward. I hope whenever I submit something as a recommendation, you'll know that I'm doing this to open it, as I said here, to update and discuss. No decisions have been made, nor would a decision like this one be made without the full counsel of the residents. And if there is background information, I would welcome it so that we can enter this process fully educated with any history that precedes us. But that was something that I heard from many, many residents when I was canvassing the neighborhoods, that people wanted a safe way to push their elderly or disabled family members or relatives, that they needed a safe place to push a stroller to get to and from bus stops safely without walking streets, without sidewalks. And so because that is something that I heard from our residents, I do think it's something that we should pursue. And what Nestor at CITT has asked us to do is to provide a plan, not a comprehensive engineering decisive plan, but just a loose sketch of what we intend, knowing that we will go forward with an open forum to discuss with the residents and everyone on this dais what would be the best way to achieve that goal if we can. And because the residents asked for it, I think it should be our first priority. I also brought to the table the municipal circulator options, which was generously shared by former Commissioner Rox Ross. And I did some close reading of the article that she shared, and it seems like municipalities with larger populations than ours, 20,000 in Pinecrest, 25,000 in Palmetto Bay, are still 1 foot on the platform, 1 foot on the train about the real value of a circulator, because there really hasn't been the kind of usage that they anticipated. And my concern is that we allocate funds for something that was not expressly requested by the residents, that might not get the level of use that we hope, instead of at least making an earnest pursuit of the sidewalks that have been requested. If that can't work out for us, if it's not realistic or it can't be implemented, I certainly think we could move on to look at a circulator, but I would really like to watch how things go with Pinecrest and Palmetto Bay and see if they're gaining the ridership and that it is worth the investment. So that's all, just something to share, and something, because we don't get an opportunity to speak to each other outside of this room, just wanted to share that and let you guys know that it's something that the manager and I are trying to at least get initial approval for eligibility of the funds from CITT to pursue our sidewalk and bike pathway connecting to transit.
And Manager, you want to add about timeframes and expending CITT funds and talk a little bit about that?
Absolutely. In conversations with Nestor over the past week, Nestor Toledo at CITT, he is concerned that we have not spent CITT funds for transit in particular in such a long time, and he's suggesting that we definitely spend something soon, or else the county is looking to take it back. And so from that perspective, we do want to move forward with either a freebie program or sidewalks or something to keep this moving, keep this funding moving as well. We certainly don't want to spend this money just to spend it on something we're not going to use. The freebie circulator, for instance, I don't think is a good fit for us, but they also have an on-demand component, which could be a better fit for us. Again, the sidewalks, if that's what the residents want, if they want that, that connectivity, then absolutely we should do that. And so.
Commissioner, I'm sorry, Vice Mayor, then Commissioner.
I obviously, I'm in agreement to figure out as a commission what we want to do with the CITT funds. I just want to comment on another item that we've discussed in the past, which were the bus shelters, I believe, where we were talking about incorporating signage in that, and that would kind of be like killing two birds with one stone with using CITT funds. I'm obviously happy to discuss something that, Commissioner Wise, in campaigning and hearing what residents want. Obviously, if that's something strong with the residents as far as the sidewalks, or not sidewalks, or pedestrian pathways that connect to transit. My only, I don't want to say concern, but I would say, is the chief still here? Or we've got our, yes. Whether we should involve police, because it's something else that's now another, it's not a roadway, but it's now a pedestrian pathway that I'm wondering, should the police look into things as to where we put this and what it would create, because it's their policing of the village that I think would increase if now there's pathways and things like that for people to walk on. And we already know some streets in the village that are cut-throughs. We don't want to inadvertently, create other types of cut-throughs or things like that the police might be concerned. So I would want probably some input or feedback as to what they think as well.
Yeah, I agree. I think it would be a good idea for the chief to be included in the conversation. But just to clarify, the proposed pathway would just connect the southernmost bus stop through the village to the northmost, so that residents deeper within the village, away from 6th Avenue, can walk either northbound or southbound, whichever is most convenient to them, to get to the stop. And it wouldn't really be bringing anyone into the village other than the residents who are needing to use the transit. It's not meant to meander around the park and create a ballade, as you will, through our village. It's really meant just to facilitate people who need transit and who can't navigate our rooty medians and narrow streets. So, but obviously it's a much larger conversation, and we'll develop it over time, but hopefully in a timely fashion, so that we can make use of the CITT funds that are available to us.
Absolutely.
And I just wanted to second what the manager was saying about the on-demand ride service, which I think may be of more utility, and to communicate well to our residents that they understand, if we do decide to allocate CITT funds to that there is something like a 25% offset for that. It's on demand, which may be better suited to some of our elderly residents who may be homebound and it's not convenient to be tied to a circulator schedule. I also see, at least with the freebie, I don't know if we have other options, but with the freebie, it requires the downloading of an app, which I don't know if that's necessarily amenable to our older residents, if that's going to be a realistic ask for them, if they're not particularly savvy, they don't have smartphones, et cetera. So something to look at, I think, is a secondary option, but I do think the idea of an on-demand service is one we could maybe pile in there as well.
Commissioner Schmerer?
I think we can use part of the CIT money in reference to on 6th Avenue. I was a couple of commissioners at the last commission brought it up in reference to crosswalks. We can have that because we have a lot of accidents on 6th Avenue.
CITT money, 6th Avenue is a state highway, so FDOT would provide all of the funding for that. We wouldn't be using CITT funds on 6th Avenue. We do want crosswalks on 6th Avenue, and we are working with FDOT to ultimately get there so that we can get those, hopefully. But, the crosswalks are a great idea. It's just, it can't be our CITT funds. We need to use those in other areas.
I want to make one more question for you. So if the bus shelters, and we get covered bus shelters, especially from the southern point through the pedestrian pathway and then to the northern point, can we, what kind of signage, and can you look into signage to see what we're permitted to have? Because that might be, that definitely would, I think, be very helpful. So I support that as well. And I support the pathways as well. I know the community has been asking about that for quite a while.
Definitely. And just to address the Vice Mayor's comment, whenever we do something like this, I work very closely with both the police and with Public Works because all of their input is very important in these decisions. And I want to make sure that I'm bringing to the commission the best decision, and that, I'm not an expert on some of this stuff. Other things I have more expertise in. But I definitely want their input wherever I can get it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And just one last comment. The public this will be shown to the public in its entirety when it's developed, and also asking for public input as to the pathway. But just to be clear, it has to connect in order to use transit funds from one public transit to the other. That's the only way we can use those funds. And if I'm not mistaken, it's $140,000, correct? Roughly? In transit. Thank you. Okay.
Mayor, I have 12B as well.
Yeah. So 12B is now Commissioners Wise. Report out on Florida League of Cities EMO learnings.
Yes. EMO is what they call it. Thank you very much for allowing me to attend. It was a really great experience. I met some other very interesting electeds and had a great exchange of information, and I learned a great deal. A little bit of it was death by PowerPoint, but otherwise, I'm very glad that I went. And I just wanted to share a couple things that I thought you all might like to hear about. So the FPL duplicate poll removal, I think, Mr. Manager, if you wanted to update us a little bit on that. It was just, I came back asking about it because I came to understand that those polls are capital assets for FPL, and because they can depreciate those, and there just isn't a real financial motivation to remove them. And so that could have been part of the reason that we were struggling with that. But I spoke to the manager, and he assured us that we had some progress there. I don't know if you want to just update everyone about that, as you did me.
Absolutely, yes. We worked with Dave Caserta, our lobbyist, to get this process going, to start removing some of the double polls. On each poll, there's a hierarchy. There's FPL at the top, and then I believe Comcast. And
AT&T, then Comcast, I think.
Vice versa.
AT&T, then Comcast, correct? Okay.
AT&T, then Comcast, okay. And so it's coordinating all three utilities to clear the polls first, and then whoever owns the poll, whether it's FPL or AT&T, has to come in and remove it. And since David Hernandez has joined us as well, he's been spearheading this and has done a fantastic job. We're starting to see more of the polls be removed now. And so we've sort of gone, through Dave Caserta from the top down, and from David Hernandez through the middle on up to the top. And we're getting results. And so it's coming along. David, do you have something you'd like to add?
I'm sorry, would you go to the podium, sir? I know your voice will project without it, but thank you.
Yeah, David Hernandez, Public Works Manager. When this was brought up to my attention, there was a few polls that needed to be removed. I identified those polls. We made sure that they were all cleared, so I removed about 5 polls. FPL removed 5 polls. The removal, because they were already ready to be removed. Right now we have about 14 polls. I have already set up a meeting, like the manager said, with all the proper agencies, which is Comcast, AT&T, and FPL. That meeting is set up for the 13th. And the purpose of that meeting is to get everybody on the same page, so there's no more finger pointing, and make sure that we follow through which agency needs to do what first to go ahead and start the removal process. Okay? So I'm on it, and again, I have a meeting again with on the 13th with all agencies, AT&T, Comcast, and FPL.
Thank you. And if you could keep us all updated, because I know the community has been long waiting the removal of these polls.
Yes, and again, there was a few polls that they needed to get removed, and we identified them, and with the help of Caesar and working together, trying to get everything, and they've already removed about 5 polls.
I'm sorry, David, you said there's 14?
There's about 14
remaining
existing polls that need to be addressed, and there's a few also that I'm going to get to the meeting, because there's a few polls that we want to see if we could
moved,
relocate it. Mr. Redmond brought one to my attention just a few weeks ago. I'll see if I can get that relocated.
Thank you very much.
The purpose is to remove the old pole. FPL comes in and puts in the new poles, and then the transfers haven't been done, so they could complete the transfers.
Just for clarification, if I may, there's the lower wires were left on for a lot of these poles, even though FPL relocated to their new poles.
Correct.
And so AT&T Comcast lines are still sitting on there, and everybody points the finger as who's got to remove what first. So what the manager of Public Works is saying is that they're going to get those poles, everybody at the same time, remove, redo, and then whoever owns the pole
transfers, and then replace and remove.
I'm sorry, just one question. I'm sorry, Commissioner Samara.
By any chance, did you happen to talk to FP&L in reference to them taking care of the poles that they already have that have transformers? Perfect example. My house has a transformer that's FP&O that had a beehive in it. It took almost 6 months for them to get it out. And when a storm hits, it blows out about 10 houses. There is a whole bunch of houses that have that problem. We need to get into touch with FP&O to have them clean up their poles.
Okay, I'm glad you brought that to my attention.
And I'm sure the manager can work with you, but there's some weird utility lines issues we have in some of the houses, and they tend to not trim those trees. I know, believe Commissioner Wise, I believe one of them is your street, if I'm not mistaken, where they have...
I had them come out and they were like, nope. And I mean, if you have eyes, you would say yes.
Yeah, so...
FPL does trim the lines. However, Comcast and AT&T won't.
No, this is I'll talk about it after. I'll take it off, but there's some issues that need, while you're at that meeting and you have them, I can talk to the manager and he can inform you.
Excellent.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
That kind of brings me. No, you can. I didn't mean to keep you in place. I'm sorry. It just is a nice segue to just a discussion of the franchise fee agreement that we have with FPL. Another thing that was a matter of discussion at EMO, and I've come to learn a lot more about. And I've shared an article within the materials this evening. It's not the best written piece of literature in the world, but it does bring a lot of the facts to light. So if you're not familiar with it, I'm sure many of you in here are familiar with the nuances of franchise fee agreement, but just in summary, it's a pass-through tax. We're at a place where we can't raise our millage, and we need more revenue, and FPL collects taxes for us on the utility bills of our residents and passes those through to us after deducting what they see as reasonable expenses. There are a lot of reasons that it bothers me, sort of traditional taxation without representation issues, and the fact that it's hidden, and that there are a lot of I think a lot of people who aren't aware of how that works. One of the things, and I'm not stupid, it amounts to about, $200,000 in revenue for us every year, and we do need that money. So I'm not proposing that we walk away from it, but I am proposing that we take a close look at that franchise agreement. And again, I don't get to talk to you all day to day, so if you would take a look at that and chew it over and do some research on your own. A franchise agreement is not a contract. There's no consideration for that, so we're somewhat stuck in it. One thing it does offer us, though, is an opportunity to audit what is collected and then deducted by FPL before it is passed along to us. And I had an opportunity to speak with our manager and Mr. Winklejohn about that, and the fact that we've never really audited them to discover whether or not we have. You're nodding in the back of the room, okay. And when was that an audit last performed? Okay, so it's been a while. Maybe it's time to take a look at that again. One of the reasons I think it's a worthwhile endeavor is to make sure that we are getting our fair cut of everything that it is that they collect. If we're not, obviously we should go after that. there have been a number of municipalities who have been successful in achieving generous settlements with FPL for a variety of reasons. We're not similarly situated to all of those situations. You can read about Hollywood and their, I think, $1.3 million settlement from FPL. The point is FPL is very litigation averse, and if we do find any errors or malfeasance in what they are taking out of our coffers and keeping for themselves, I think we might find that they could pony up a little bit of money to just keep things trucking along smoothly. So I do think it's worth our time and effort to take a look at that, but also worth our time and effort to look at the agreement altogether, because we are handcuffed to them, even if we were to choose alternative energy options, which is obviously a good idea as that technology is moving forward apace, and they have a right of first refusal. So, and if we do move on to something else, I think we're still obligated to allow them to collect their franchise fees. So I just wanted to bring that to the table because that was something that was brought to my attention, and while it may be old news to a lot of you, I think an audit back in 2011 is definitely not current enough for us to look our residents in the eyes and say that we're watching every penny that's taken from their pockets in the form of taxes. This portion's not a write-off either, as it is when they're paying their ad valorem. And then the last piece was freelance code enforcement options. I met, as I said, a bunch of electeds at EMO. I got some great references around freelance code enforcement that we can use so that we can supplement our staff when we need to, so that we have greater oversight without putting ourselves in any kind of financial jeopardy should there be an economic crisis once again. You never know. Things are bumpy nowadays. And so to have access to these freelance officers would be a great option for us. And I did mention, I saw Christina in passing and told her that I had shared that with you, and I know that she's interested in that in the event that you guys want to expand that. So just a lot of information that I bring back and lay on the table. Do with it what you will. Thank you.
Thank you so much. We're going to move on to now 12C. We welcome the chair of the board, who's been patiently waiting for the Public Safety Advisory Board recommendations. Is he here today?
I don't see him here today.
Okay.
Okay.
I can present this on behalf of the board, or Mike Redmond, you're on the board. If you'd like to present, you want me to handle it?
I'd like to.
Okay. Fun quick.
Well, just correct me if I get anything wrong. How's that? Okay. The Public Safety Advisory Board came forth with some recommendations for traffic calming, and there is one error that I see here on item 1B, number 2. That should be 111th Street, north and southbound instead of 113th. There's already stop signs at 113th, so and it's a recommendation that stop signs be placed at those locations. Griffin Boulevard at 121st Street.
I'm sorry, could you hold on one second? Can we pull that up so everybody can see? Sure. Thank you. 1 second, please. Street, yep. Thank you so much. If you could scroll down. There you go. Okay, thank you.
And there's the locations. I won't go through them all individually. But those are additional stop signs just to start making the traffic have to stop a little more frequently. For instance, once you pass 113th Street, it's a straight shot southbound to Griffin, and people tend to zoom along there. And so an additional stop sign at 111th, and then, that would help break it up a little bit more. Several locations there. They also recommended that thermoplastic paint with glass beads be used at all stop bars and lateral lines at stop intersections. Those lines are currently being repainted, I believe, hopefully starting tomorrow by the county. I'm not sure if they're going to do the glass beads or not, but all of the stop bars throughout the village will be repainted.
Okay.
Request the commission authorize the manager to implement a pilot program of non-asphalt speed cushions. And again, that's something that I've worked with the police chief and with the public works manager, and we are looking into it. We'll bring forth some recommendations on the type of materials to use, costs, and so forth, coming forth in the future if the commission's interested in that.
Okay.
Again, stop sign information, speed tables. They'd like to see speed tables around the rec center and several places through the village. We are, again, talking about a pilot program just to check out some speed cushions. It would probably be four or six initially, just to get a feel for it, see what it's like, see how it disrupts traffic, how it slows traffic, and make sure that, the residents like it as well.
I think you have some folks who want to add to that.
Okay.
I think you've got some backup here.
Gentlemen?
Mr. Manager, thank you. First and foremost, David is the lead on this, so I'll let David do, some of the explaining. But what we're trying to achieve here is, public safety, and to ensure that we take a holistic approach on how we're going to address the traffic concerns throughout the village. I attend all the public safety meetings. Phenomenal board. They do a good job. They're very thorough. And the goal here is to make sure with taking this holistic approach, we identify various different methods in order to address the traffic problems within the village. One of the things they've targeted is critical areas where we can put additional stop signs and traffic calming devices. The other is identifying with the police department where we're going to do radar patrolling, and moving patrols. The other option that we have discussed is these traffic cushions that we can put in critical areas within the village. And like I said, David will discuss those in a bit. But we've looked at 6 locations throughout the village, basically in the areas where there's egress and ingress into the village, and where one of the residents was discussing, they have that curve that people take around the village that is extremely dangerous.
On 11th Place?
Yes. I was gonna let David explain the location. So, but just from a public safety perspective, I'll tell you where I am concerned, and where I asked the commission to consider this, the public to have a little faith in us. We're going to work, we're going to be transparent, but there's a timing issue. My concern is that a lot of these projects, the county opens the door. I brought a presentation here a couple of months ago, where in Coral Gables, South Miami, and in other areas, the county was open to these traffic calming devices, and then and the opportunities there now to work with them. This happened with the street closures several years ago, 2006, roughly. They opened the window for that, and it began, concerns arose with, too much traffic in other areas. It shut down, and they didn't let anybody else, look into that any further. They will tell you, do a traffic study. You spend $75,000, $80,000, and then they say, it's still up to us. We have spent a lot of time, David more than I, doing a think tank thing, working with the Public Safety Board, and I highly recommend you. I think everybody knows since I've gotten here in June how passionate I've been about trying to address the traffic concerns that we have in the village. Yes, one of the residents brought earlier, we can write more citations, but we can only write what's there, and we can only write what we see. If we take an approach where we have different tools and resources at our disposal, it will be a lot more helpful. So with that having said, I plead to the commission, please take this into consideration today. Allow us to move forward so we can begin to further explore avenues with the county, look into these companies, locations where we want to put them, and continue forward, because I think time is going to be critical for us And go ahead. I'm going to turn it over to David.
I think the chief said it best. I think that what we're looking for, what the administration would like, is for the commission to give us the opportunity to look into these avenues so we could move forward. And my thought process was, if we could establish some type of pilot program, where then I could work with the, work with the county and try to get some of this implemented. Like the chief says, there's a little door that we have open now. I think that I strongly urge, and I believe that if we take advantage of this little door, I think we could move forward. In 2006, 2007, many cities in the 90s started doing street closures. And they decided that those street closures were approved. Subsequently, what happened was that the actual people, that overflow went into state and county roads. And then the county decided, wait a minute, you're adding too much traffic to our county roads, that we use city roads. And then the county basically said no. So the fact that they would come to us right now and say, hey, we would like to do a traffic study, which this city did a traffic study in 2007 and spent numerous dollars. I cannot do that again. I can't see the city spending money on this, because I know exactly what the outcome is going to be. The county is going to turn around and says, thank you for the recommendation of your traffic study after you spent $70,000, $80,000. However, we're going to implement what we think is best. And I think that this is the best way to approach this, doing some type of pilot program. Yeah, there's a few cities also that have already installed some of these. Like Miami Shores and El Portal and other cities that I know outside, because remember, there are 37 different municipalities in Dade County.
Mayor, do you have a motion?
I just want to be clear, are you seeking a motion for us to move forward for the pilot program for the speed cushions, or for all measures that are in the recommendation of the Public Safety Advisory Board?
All measures that are recommended in the Public Advisory Board. I think that what the Public Advisory Board has brought up, I think that we can move forward and try to implement as best possible.
Okay, Commissioner Samari, go ahead.
Yeah, I make a motion to accept it.
I have before we move on to a second, I just have a question.
Before we do a second, if it's okay with Commissioner Samari, Commissioner Wise?
I just want to make sure, I want to be clear what we're motioning for. Is this to sort of, because, this is a nice list, but to have a plan that we can actually present, and there be a public airing of that, so that the residents know what's going forward, that this isn't just us saying, yeah, this looks great, go for it. I think we need to, and I know it needs to be expeditious. I know, like you said, the window's closing, but I don't want us to go putting, speed bumps on people's streets without them knowing it, and then, let's give people just a minute to take in what the plan is. So if we could.
I totally understand. I concur with you. But the idea is to open us up so that we could work with the manager and the police chief, so we could come back to you, to this board, and then we could start we could then give us a recommendation for implementation.
Okay.
Essentially, the board has just made their recommendation to the commission as they're supposed to do. And I'm just looking for direction from the commission. If you'd like me to proceed with this, then we'll bring back plans and all of that.
Okay.
And so.
Sure. And if we could have just a written, I would love to see a numbered process. This is step one. This is step two. Sure. This is where we have village input. I'm a process person, so I would certainly second a motion if that were going to be done. Okay. Deliberately.
I concur with Commissioner Wise. I'm fine with seeing the progress here and things that have been recommended, but we need something a little more solid to know how we're proceeding, whether or not residents are on board, where these speed tables will be placed, having neighbors and stuff be able to comment on that. Something else I also wanted to express as well is, and I think the chief touched on this, of having those alternatives and different tools, because the police can't be everywhere at once. I notice, at least on my street, that I feel like we need a lowering of the speed limit village-wide. Certainly on the streets, but I think it's probably easier if it's streets and avenues. But 25 miles an hour on the streets is fast. On average, we all know when we're driving, we tend to drive 5 miles over the speed limit. So when I'm outside watering the grass, I'm seeing a van come plowing down 116th Street because it's 25 miles an hour. So I think that should be something that's also looked into as far as lowering the speed limit, especially with the comment that Matt Kennedy made on 11th Place with the fact that there's a blind spot. Then that's certainly a location where speed should be reduced.
All right, Commissioner, so to answer both commissioners' questions, so Commissioner Weiss, so we're looking at implementing it in 2 to 3 phases. So the first phase, we want to bring up to the commission recommendations of at least six humps or cushions throughout the village. We're looking at areas on the egress and ingress, 8th, 10th, and 11th place. Those are where we're recommending phase 1. Phase 2, we're looking at specially designed, and that will obviously have to, more public input and more aesthetically pleasing speed cushions around the park area, because the park is conducive to people walking, the rolling, the strollers, different activities. So we want to be, sensitive to what the needs are for that area. So we'll provide some recommendations for those areas. And then finally, the third phase, we'll look at if there's additional cushions needed or any other devices throughout the village. So that's what we're considering right now. Part of the holistic approach we want to take.
Just one quick question. 7th, don't forget about 7th, just saying. Because I know
Yes,
the people on 7th will get excited if they don't hear their name.
Right, so I'm sorry that I missed an avenue.
Just for the public.
So that
for the pilot program,
I'm just saying.
We're only going to do 3 streets initially to test it out.
Right.
And
Right.
after that, yes, 7th Avenue.
That'll be phase 2 and 3. That's what we're looking at. And that's obviously with, we're going to ask the public, what are the areas of more importance? So they may say, okay, before you do this one and this one, please help us with the park. So, we'll get input at that point and so on. But to answer the question about how do we want to also approach this, the signage, the lowering of the speed limit, traffic enforcement. Part of we continue, myself and the commander continue to do is we radar train the officers. So I haven't told anybody, but I guess I'm going to put it out there now. We have officers doing radar right out here in Griffin, and it's when they take that curve coming off from the shores here, they're going fairly fast, and we've noticed that, and we're addressing it. We're addressing the stop sign violations. We have 2 motors. We just sent 1 officer who will be graduating this Friday from motor school, and he will be on the bike 4 days a week out here. So from the police side of it, we're doing the enforcement, but it's important we have additional stop signs. Like we get a lot of complaints about 119th. We get complaints about different areas where they want different signage, lower speed limits. So all of that is going to come into play. And I think when we have it all there, it'll work. Why do we have to do it in phases? And this we've had the discussion, if we come in and we try to do it all at once, the county is going to scream, and they're basically going to say, wait a minute, this is no longer a pilot. You guys have changed, the traffic patterns here. So we have to go into phases, continue to communicate with the county, work with them, and that's the ultimate goal. Try to accomplish this within 2 to 3 phases.
Any questions?
I just want to interject one thing. There's no one magic bullet. However, there's police, there's public works together looking for avenues to find better solutions. So, but remember, there's not one magic bullet we have here, but we can look for other avenues. like I said, traffic calming devices, maybe speed limits, whatever avenues we could explore is what we want to come back and do and study, and give you, and then come back and get your recommendation.
Okay, I believe there was a motion on the floor. If you'd like to restate your motion,
Yeah,
sir.
I'd like to make a motion to go forward with the board's recommendations, but also, I know people don't like workshops. I like workshops because I like to have residents' participation, and I really think that we need to have a workshop in reference to some of these, when they bring us things back.
Okay, we need a motion.
Okay, I make a motion to accept.
Okay, there's a motion to accept the recommendations by the Public Safety Advisory Board.
And give them guidance.
Provided, I'm going to see if I can help formulate your motion, if I may, and you can correct me if I'm not understanding you. With moving forward to ensure public's input on the process.
Yes.
Okay?
I second the motion.
Okay, all those in favor? Aye. Motion passes 4-0.
Thank you.
Okay, 12D, Manager Manners, this is your piece?
Sure. We have budgeted for 2 additional code vehicles in this year's budget. We've been working with Enterprise Fleet Management, who manages our fleets, and they sent us some options. I specifically was looking at hybrids, because I wanted to get a hybrid for the village, thinking, the gas savings would probably be substantial. At the time that we send out the agenda, what I had was estimates for the hybrids, and we looked at a Nissan Rogue hybrid. In fact, I think the cost of the additional hybrid aspect of it would offset any savings we would have with gas, and so I went ahead and I asked for additional quotes for different vehicles that weren't hybrids from Enterprise. They came back with a good price on a Toyota RAV4 SUV, which is better than the Nissan. They last forever, and we'll be able to replace at least. I'd like to buy at least one right now, and so we can hold off on the second one for the time being, but I would like to purchase one to replace the code truck. It's on its last legs, the air conditioning doesn't work, that sort of thing, and I'd rather not put another dime in it. I'd rather go ahead and...
So you're asking for one Toyota, right? At this point, so you're modifying this request to one vehicle. Do you have the cost of that monthly?
I do, 1 second. The Toyota RAV4, the monthly cost would be $476, and this is a 60-month lease with buyout at the end, and so, it's our standard, dollar buyout, and it would be, total price is $24,900. So,
Commissioners?
I can just say that as a former owner of a Toyota RAV4 that I drove across the country for 14 weeks and lived out of it. It's an incredibly reliable vehicle. Just saying. I can speak. Anecdotal.
Where would this money come from?
This money is budgeted already.
It's already been budgeted?
It's already budgeted, yeah.
Vice Mayor?
I'm just, so since we don't have the lease rate quote for that vehicle, I just want to make sure that the 476 number that you're quoting would be basically, if I'm looking at the chart that's here for the Rogue, that number includes the additional services and everything the same here, because I just want to make sure I'm comparing.
It does. I have the quote for the RAV4 right here. I just got it late this afternoon, so if you'd like to see
You want to give a chance for the commission to see it at least before we.
Yep.
And just for the public interest, the MSRP of a Toyota RAV right now is $25,500. Thank you, Google.
And just to be clear, as they're reviewing it, this is negotiated by state, so we get some discount on this, or?
This commission has previously approved.
I'm sorry, not state. I meant the contract, sorry.
A contract with Enterprise under a commonly referred to piggyback of an existing contract. And when you approved it, it provided for not only the maintenance component that the chief has already talked about earlier this evening, but also gives the ability to purchase vehicles from them, subject to the quote process that the manager just was talking about.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner?
I was
No?
saying not this commission.
Okay.
It wasn't approved by this commission.
Okay, I just want to say thank you for picking a vehicle that has a record, because I did some research when you were looking at the Nissan, and I know the manager and I had discussions. I'm very pleased that you picked a vehicle that has a high mileage lifespan, because I think that's one of the things that was critical to me, was to make sure if we're going to buy something, it lasts a long time, doesn't cost a lot of maintenance, and we get our bang for buck. So I thank you for that choice.
We'll provide that.
Yep. Apologize for the delay, everybody. Okay, got it. Here. Just for the public, the one that they have up, the main difference is the price of the vehicle and the fact that it's not a hybrid. Commissioner, sir, whenever you're ready, just let us know.
Okay.
Okay. Is there a motion to approve the purchase of one RAV4 at the current estimate that was passed around for the code department?
I move to approve the purchase of the Toyota RAV4 as described by the manager.
Is there a second?
I'll second the motion.
All those in favor? Aye. Motion passes 4-0. Item 12E was pulled, so we're in 12F, Commissioner Samaria, driveway ordinance. Or, I'm sorry, as you refer...
Mayor, one second, please. The chief had just texted me a moment ago and requested that he be able to speak on the police radios real quickly. Would you entertain that?
I would have no problem as long as my fellow commissioners have no problem.
No, I have no problem.
None, go ahead.
I understand that this is not a topic that will be voted on, but I just want you all to understand the dire need for these radios. We are currently renting 4 radios at $100 a piece from the county. Those 4 radios are trying to salvage what we're doing with the reserve program with the part-timers that we have not had before. Those radios are for radios alone. The quotes that we were looking at from Cooper General, Harris Radio, who actually manufactures the radios, as well as the county, who provides our radio service now. They have to program the radios anyway, and they buy from Harris directly in a bulk rate. Miami-Dade County provided us with the lowest rate of $29,000 for 10 radios, 10 chargers, 10 antennas for the radios, microphones, and antennas for the microphones, which would then be financed through Bancorp, and it comes out to about $580, $570,
something like that, yeah,
a month.
I think so.
That is for leasing to own 10 radios. As we are currently doing now, we're putting out $400 a month for 4 radios that we do not own. We are not paying into that. We're not getting an investment out of that. In the event something happens to those radios, we're liable for the full charges of those radios. My opinion is that is a bad business going forward. To rent the radios, we need to honestly be looking into purchasing these radios by whatever means that is, but this is a need. The part-time positions are not positions that we had before. We now have 6 of them. They need radios. This is a fundamental need for communication, whether it's to dispatch the officers to calls or for the officers' need for help.
And I agree about the urgency of this. We desperately need these. I pulled this because there was some question about the purchasing aspect of it. We were purchasing these from Miami-Dade, who gets a better discount, because whereas we will buy 10 of these, they will buy 1,000. And so we would get the volume discount that they're receiving. The attorney informed me tonight that we needed some additional information on this, and so that was why I pulled it.
Is there a way we can pass it pending that further? I mean, clearly there's a support. I'm not into pissing my colleagues here, but if there's support for it, is there any way to move forward in a way that would be appropriate legally?
The village's existing procurement regulations states that if you're going to make a purchase over $10,000, it has to be put out to bid, an invitation to bid, unless, and I understand the chief and the manager's comment, there is several exceptions or exemptions to your mandatory purchasing requirements. And one of those exemptions is the council votes to make a determination that there's an emergency need to purchase the item in question. So if you are so inclined, you could move to waive the competitive bidding requirements under that exemption by declaring that there's an emergency purchase that needs to be fulfilled as set forth by the manager and explained by the chief and the manager.
May I just state or ask a question of the commander and or the chief? Do you consider this an emergency piece based upon your officers being without radios?
I personally do, and not to mention the fact that we are not far off from hurricane season. I realize in Florida we're always right around the corner from that, but that is a critical time. And,
Commissioner Weiss?
And now we're going to have...
So you would define it as there is a real risk to the officers of being, because I believe it's defined in the charter, this exception to the RFP rule.
Correct.
And I think there's some language around a threat to life, property. I just want to make sure that we're honoring the language of our charter in making this exception, and we're not stretching it. So if we can properly define it, then it sounds to me like it makes good sense.
In my opinion, it is not only a detriment to the officers, but to the community as well, that they do not have these radios.
So if I'm not mistaken, we're going to have to, which is unusual, but put the item back in?
You can at the request of the manager, put it back on the agenda for consideration.
Okay, so for the start, is there a motion? First thing, is there a motion to put back item 12E back onto the agenda?
Madam Mayor, I'm sorry. I have one more question. With this purchase that you're proposing, is there like a servicing package rolled into that? I mean, obviously, rental is an inferior option, but I'm presuming that whomever is renting them to you is servicing the radios. I just want to make sure that if we're paying a little bit more, obviously we're investing to own, but that we're also getting some sort of warranty or service along with that.
Correct.
Okay.
Thank you. All right, so is...
Also,
I'm sorry, go ahead, Vice Mayor.
Because I just don't, I understand the commander saying that if there is an urgency, but I think that we have to be able to assess that as a commission and make sure that it's backed up. I understand the language is in the charter, but I just want to make sure we can back up the fact that it's an emergency. Also, dovetailing off of what Commissioner Wise has said, if it's not going out to a bid and we're looking at one quote here, whether or not this is the best option, because we're not leasing something. I don't remember, Commander, if you've told us how long is the lease? How many years?
The lease is a 5-year lease.
Okay, and what is the usual useful life of these radios?
Indefinitely until the county upgrades, and that is undeterminable.
It's not like they're going to break down or something like in the 6th year or 7th year.
I mean, of course, things happen, and that's covered under, whatever type of warranty you get with the radios. But outside of an extreme accident, there is no, in 2 years, they're going to be out of service.
And our insurance covers that, correct? Now, whereas on the leases that does not? Is that my understanding?
Under the rental.
Under the rental, it does not, correct?
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah. Also, I'd like to say that Commander Walschlager did go out and look at other companies. So I asked him to do that, to get comparative quotes. I have one here for exactly the same thing, that 29,000, and this is for $48,812. So getting in on the purchasing through the county is going to be our best price on this, I believe.
Okay, if I may, because we are already discussing it, I just want to formalize that we can. Go ahead, Attorney Heron. I can say you're nipping at the bud, so go ahead.
What I would suggest that we do is that you take the vote to put the item back on the agenda.
Okay. Do I have a motion to put? Do I have a motion 12E to put purchase of police radios back onto the agenda?
Yes, I make a motion to put it back on the agenda.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Okay, motion is now put on. Attorney Heron.
So you have a charter provision, so let's make sure we use the right. You have a charter provision that says that you're supposed to use and adopt a competitive bidding process, which you have done in your code. There's a code section that says, for purchase over $10,000, which this certainly meets that criteria, the code requires you to go out and solicit bids, sealed bids, from at least 3 entities. You put out the technical specs and see who responds. With that said, section 2-139 of the Village Code states, the Village Commission may, by majority vote, waive the competitive bidding procedures outlined in this article upon the recommendation of the village manager or his or her designee that it is in the best interest to do so, to obtain goods and services which cannot be acquired through the normal purchasing procedures due to insufficient time, the nature of the goods or service, or other factors. So you would all have to make an affirmative determination that it was appropriate to waive the competitive bidding procedures under the language I just quoted in section 2-139 because of the emergency nature as has been recommended by the manager and the police.
May I ask the chief and the commander just a couple of questions? How many radios are you now having that you are short sometimes on staff?
Several. I know that the chief himself has given up his radio on numerous occasions, as have myself. So, I mean, it is a touch and go.
The commander's being very mild and gentle on how he's describing this. I'll put it to you this way. I no longer have a radio. The commander doesn't have a radio. We've given our radio to the officers in the field. We're operating
that's acceptable.
Way below 10 radios short. And it's a public safety issue. It's an officer safety issue. And I want to make sure, because if we're going to be transparent, we must do so. It's not so much of an emergency issue, it's more of a public safety issue. If we're not able to provide these imminent resources to the officers that are out there, we tie their hands and we put the public at risk.
And the officers as well.
And the officers at risk, absolutely. I'm going to give you a quick example. We're working this weekend. We had roughly about 6 officers that volunteered to work the art and farmers market. I don't have radio, so obviously, I tend to think outside the box. I will work that out. I will not allow anybody to be put into jeopardy, but that is not a critical event. It's not a critical incident, but I just want you to have an understanding of the state of the police department. Is this a good or bad thing? I personally think it's neither. It's the fact that we have a vision, we have goals, we've expanded the police department, we're able to provide more resources and better services. I always said that one of the goals was to provide superior services to the public, and we continue to strive day in and day out. And we just need we need certain basic tools. I can't have officers out there without radios, without guns, and without cars. I mean,
I think you stated that brilliantly, and I will say, after reviewing the footage from MSD, Margie Stoneman Douglas, it to me is insane not to have communication at this day and night. So I just want to, do we have a consensus on the commission, and village attorney, just please make sure I'm following all the rules. Do we have a consensus that this is a reason to go outside the RFP process? Yes?
Yes, I mean, I'm looking at the section 2-139, and I mean, the word emergency isn't in it, so I take what the chief says, and there is an insufficiency of time, and the other factors, I would say that this is a real, public safety and welfare issue. So I think I'm okay to move forward. I would still ask the attorney's opinion.
It would be my recommendation that you make a motion to approve the purchase of the radios as requested by staff, and waiving the competitive bidding procedures because it does meet the requirements of section 2-139 of the Village Code.
If we could use that exact motion, is that exact motion anybody want to make?
I'll make the motion to accept the police department's recommendation that we waive the competitive bidding procedures pursuant to section 2-139 as sufficient cause was established.
I'd ask the village manager.
Village manager, apologize.
Okay, is there a second?
I second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Motion passes 4-0. Okay. Moving on to now 12F. Commissioner Samaria, I believe you reworded this, so I'll let you go ahead and use the same verbiage that you used and introduce your item. It's 12F. Look for this tab.
Just trying to. Okay. After doing some thinking this weekend, my goal here is to have this done right, and this has been going on so long that it needs to be finally, as they say, almost be put to bed. That's where the residents can understand what's going on. What I like to do is I like with the commission to make a decision tonight to either go back with the board or to hire an outside company. That's where we can get this process going. I like to give my pros and cons and what I think it is, and then like to hear what other commissioners think. And I like to ask something that's unusual, and I'm hoping that the commission would bear with me on this. I'm going to ask something that's unusual. I like to have, after we make our recommendations and do all of it, that we hear from somebody that was on that board. And he might be able to justify his or her pros and cons on it. Because the whole idea is to do this right. And I don't want to have where we hire an outside company and it turns out we could have been done better with inside. I'm hoping I'm explaining it right. So I'm asking that if, after we do this, each of the commissioners give their pros and cons, or whether or not we bring back the code, the code board.
Is the chair of the Code Review Board here?
Yes, he is.
Chair is not here, but I was on the board.
He was on the board.
Okay.
And I know it's unusual, but the key is we want to do this right. But,
It's really up to the fellow commissions. The other thing I would say is, if in order to do that, it might be also advantageous to do it at the same time as Giordano's here, so that both are presented.
Right.
But I have no objection if my fellow commissioners do not.
No objection.
So
No,
I
I don't have any objection to it.
Mr.
but-
Kuehl, would you be so kind just to come to...
First, okay.
Well, here's my question. I would like to hear, because in order to have pros and cons, I'd like to hear from the person, and if that's the gist, if that's okay with Commissioner Samaria.
No, that's okay.
Mr. Kuehl?
Well, whether you want the board to proceed or you hire an outside firm, you need to know what you want. This really comes down to is, based on the workshop and what I understood, what we're going to do with swales. I mean, you have an ordinance already. And unless you hire somebody who's clairvoyant, they don't know what to do. And you can spend an extraordinary amount of money and get no result. I think really what the board did was work with people from P&Z and code compliance and the code officer to determine what the problems were, and then to come up with suggestions, solutions to those problems. It wasn't a fishing trip to just come up with stuff. Okay? Most of what was done survives and is fine. In my mind, the purpose of hiring a professional, and there may be a place for that, is to organize the code. There's a lot of cross-references that need to be checked, and to put it into a format that is enforceable. But the basis needs to be there to begin with. We used to have our attorney do that. Not a comment about our present attorney or an attorney in general, but they're not code writers either. Okay? But again, 95% of what we produced has never been challenged. It works unless the commission or code enforcement sees the problem. It survived and it works. So we spent many years on this, a long, long time. And it was a good group and things were thoroughly vetted. The community is welcome. Commission members are welcome. It was not something that was done secretively. The village manager is welcome. And I had discussed this previously with the manager at one of our code compliance board meetings. And I said, yeah, we definitely want, code compliance involved. Because, they are the eyes and ears of the village. So I hope that's helpful.
Thank you very much. Are there any questions for Mr. Kuhl before he steps down?
No. I just wanted to give the opportunity for him to speak.
Thank you so much. Appreciate it.
Okay. I'd like to start off with my pros and
Please.
cons. And again, I'm no expert at this, so hopefully I'm not wrong on what I'm about to say. Okay. One, the pros, we already had this ordinance that the board did in 2004 and was presented to the commission in 2003 and was completely changed. One, it needs to be treated. It can be treated. Board members live and know the village. Now, the con is the time frame to do this. We need to reinstate the board. Then we have to see if the members that were on the board want to do it again. If not, the commission must come up with new members, then approve them. Each step would take a month because the commission has to approve it. Then the board must meet and do it. Then bring it back to the commission where the commission does their thing. This could take 4 to 6 months. We have spent so much time and money on this that we still have no results. Now, if the outside company could, the present code that we have works, and I think we just need really to treat it. Maybe the outside company can do that. I don't know. Now, for hiring an outside company, my pro is, yes, we do need to do RFP. That could be done by, according to the city manager, which I've spoken to, could be done by March, right? To get an RFP. If the
The cost, I don't know that we would have to do an RFP for this.
If it's under 10,000.
Just doing the one code item. Their quote to me was for around $7,000.
Well, to be specific, I want to, if we did decide to do this outside company, that's just to do one item. I mean, whoever the company is, try them out in this and see if it works. If it does work, then we can have them do other stuff, but I just wanted for this driveway ordinance.
Can I ask the manager a question on that?
Sure.
Commissioner West.
Mr. Manager, the 7,000, was that a quote to rewrite the entire driveway ordinance or just to add a little bit of detail around swale?
And that was to rewrite the driveway.
But
Could we revisit it, as it seems that that little piece of swale is the issue? Why would we spend $7,000 rewriting something that appears to be high functioning? And we can address the other internal inconsistencies of the code at another time, which would likely be a much larger number, but let's quickly solve our problem less expensively. Would that be possible?
I think that would be possible. When I originally got that number from them, it was last year. It was in a brief conversation when we were starting with the driveway ordinance and looking at it. How much would you charge us to rewrite it and do it right? And that was the conversation at that point. Now that we've moved forward a little bit with it, we've determined that hey, there's parts that we like, parts that we that we do want to tweak, then at that point, I can talk with them again and see, we'll have to narrow down specifically what we'd like them to do, what we'd like them to address, certainly the organization of it as well, and, and see what they would charge.
Vice Mayor.
I don't think I have much different to add than what Commissioner Weiss has said. I would like to see it, because from what I got from having the workshop was that we were going to have a starting place and that we were going to go back to that 2015 ordinance, what is working. If there's little things that need to be tweaked, okay, fine. But that's our starting point. Like Mr. Kuhl said, we can't just hire a third party and not know what we're asking for.
Absolutely.
Because it's
Yeah,
just
that's
a waste of
of
time.
money.
We're just spending money.
Okay.
So I completely agree with what Commissioner Wise is saying, to go back to them and see, okay, what is it? Because I do agree that at least starting with this driveway ordinance, getting that outside company with their professionalism of writing code. Gary, you're right. As an attorney, doesn't mean that you write code. Because in the future, I'd like to see our code improved, and this could be a place to start. But I don't think it's a $7,000 number if the commission is in agreement, as what I thought was coming out of the workshop, that we were going to take that 2015 ordinance and deal with the swale.
And if I may, just a moment, if I may just give a comment. The issue for the swales is, and I agree with Mr. Kuhl, that you have to have a starting point. You have to know what you're asking them to do. And to do that, whether we are enjoying our workshops or not, I thought the last one was very good. I thought that I really appreciated everybody coming out, really expressing what they felt. I think we should do the same with the swales, so we have an idea of what everybody wants. Because ultimately, we need something that works for everybody. And I think there was also another, and I don't recall who made this statement, maybe it was Mrs. Kuhl, I'm not sure, but there was an issue on, no, it wasn't Mrs. Kuhl, I'm sorry. Yes. Sorry, I don't know your name again, made a comment about making sure that what is the impact, I believe, and correct me if I'm wrong, if I hit the wrong person, I apologize, but what's the impact of doing that on the residents? So if we're going to make a change, how many residents that impacts, what those impacts are going to be, because there's fiscal impacts to residents. So I think we need, I concur with Vice Mayor regarding having to look at the swales. I think Commissioner Wise also mentioned that, and I believe even Commissioner Samari had talked about that. But I think we have to start somewhere, which is we have to start with a workshop, figuring out what we want them to do. And then the other thing I would recommend, if it's under $10,000, and we can keep it under that, there are a couple other items that we're having another workshop on. I don't know if we have a date yet that we have voted on for some key issues that would help with things that are impacting the swale that aren't specifically swale related, which is construction issues. So maybe we can get a few small items put in as well. And I think if we could get the swale workshop done, the code workshop done, then you'll have a better idea whether or not to get a quote on what those values would be. Commissioner Samaria.
One of the questions, okay, if we was to do your board, if we was to start up your board, what's the time frame that we are looking at to, I mean, if we already have something that's from 2015?
Well, I think your estimate of 6 months is really extreme.
Okay.
Because it would parallel the RFP process if you went that route. Just to answer a question the mayor brought up, the issues that we're finding obviously are construction, property management, and there's one other that's not coming to mind. It was in my mind 3 minutes ago. But there were 3 others that we felt needed to be updated or strengthened. Property management in particular, and the construction, obviously. Another avenue to this is looking at other municipalities and their codes. For instance, Palm Bay, is it? Is it Palm Bay? Palm Bay has an excellent code on construction. I mean, it's something that really, we could show the commission, you might read it and say that's fine, or you want to make some minor changes. That's always a very good avenue. The bigger municipalities have done an excellent job at writing their codes. I think our situation in terms of the village is rather unique because of the history of the village, the different situations we have, different setbacks and so forth. The big advantage to the Code Review Board that you're not going to get from an outside professional is really taking a look at those unique circumstances and trying to work out something that works for most of the village. It'll never work for everybody. The idea of saying they can be solved by variance is not a good approach. You know, you may trust the people that are in place today on planning and zoning or the village manager, but over time that will change. But if you don't have a yardstick to begin with, it's just the Wild West. Anybody can do what they want. So I think that it really is practical and important to recognize what we have in the village. I think, if my memory serves, there's something like, I didn't do the whole village, I never did the west side, there's like 60 houses that don't have driveways, but I've forgotten the numbers on Swales.
It went,
A lot of people.
It went way down on. It went well down on the driveways. Yes, Commissioner.
I have a survey here, and thanks to former Commissioner Ross for giving this to me. And I'd like to give it to. It was a survey that was done in 7/11/2017, and it was basically just an example. It says this is the most information from the survey. Out of 1,080 properties, we found 69 properties without driveway that have only swale or nothing at all. 13 without approach, 6 driveway in despair, 6 swale improved in despair, 9 properties that have too many vehicles for their driveway and were still parking on the grass.
The latter part of those statistics, I don't think are correct, but I don't have mine.
Well, anyway, they had...
Mine are within the past 6 months.
If we use the board...
But anyway, that's not really the point. I think the point is that you've got all these different situations.
Okay. So,
May I ask a question?
yes, Commissioner Ross.
So in the history of these discussions, because it sounds like you guys have given it plenty of attention, has there been enough consensus around the differentiations in the swale that you might be able to come forward, instead of looking at something 6 months down the line, could you come back in a month with a bulleted list of here are the recommendations based on our conversation and experience, and put them before us in a workshop format so we can hone in on what the regulation should be around the swale and come up with something to offer to a code writer?
Okay.
Because I feel like the residents have been waiting a long time, and to go all the way back to deliberating again seems...
Okay, well, remember, again, it's been said, and I'll say it again emphatically, we had a workshop with huge participation. This thing was beat to death. We had P&Z there, we had P&P there, we had the Code Review Board, we had the Code Compliance Board. I mean, everybody in the community. We had a huge audience. It was beat to death. And we had consensus, and we had support. And it was changed by a previous commission, okay? And that's when it went awry.
So
you may not agree, the community may not agree with what was decided back then, but at that time, we had a lot of support.
Because it would help, rather than going over and over and over in circles, could you present that to us in a format, a workshop format?
Yeah, and we'll use that as a starting point.
We have that original document as it came out of that workshop.
We got the copy.
And it went to the commission.
But if you would present it at a workshop, if there's an agreement among our commissioners?
That's the entire ordinance.
This is in 2014, this is an ordinance that came out of the workshop, correct? And then it went in front of the commission.
I'm not going to say yes unless I read it.
It's what Linda Dillon, I believe, gave.
Linda gave us at the workshop. This was done in August of 2014. That came out of the workshop, and it was presented to the commission and was changed. My question is, do you also know if the members that you have, or that you were on there, do you think that they would want to participate in doing, or do we have to start from scratch and get new board members?
No, I think I can speak for everybody that's on code compliance now. I think they'd all participate.
Code review.
It's code review.
The code compliance board would still be willing to participate.
And that's who was participated the last time?
And then I can't speak to P&Z, but I'm sure, I know that Gage was part of it. Andrew Olis was a part of it, and I'm sure they would participate. I haven't spoken to them, but I'm sure they would.
May I see if we have a consensus on the commission now to have a workshop to have you all present that so we can move forward with what you had? I do believe, based upon the workshop that we had There seemed to be consensus on at least the driveway portion. It was the swale portion. So if we could have a focus on the swale issue, that would be very helpful as a starting point for the workshop. If you think you'd be willing to do that and double check and get back with the manager. So if there's consensus, I don't think we need a motion for
Well,
that.
the first thing we got to do is we got to bring the board back, because the board is no longer in existence.
We're doing a presentation of what the board did.
Yeah,
And so-
I'm happy to do that.
So-
I don't think we need the board
Okay,
for that.
go ahead.
If that's
Commissioner
all
West.
right with the commission.
Yeah, I don't have an issue.
Do we necessarily need a workshop though? Can it just be a presentation from?
I think that makes sense. Yeah.
Yeah.
And if I'm sorry, I
Well, if I may, I know you said, do we need a workshop? What invariably happens is there's questions arise, and we end up having a discussion, and there may be more stuff brought in. But we have a public works direct manager, which we didn't have back then. We have the chief, which we have now, and they have made some significant comments regarding swale. I'd like it to be a workshop. That's my preference.
I want residents' participation.
Absolutely, just like the previous one.
Okay.
Yeah, I guess if it's narrowed to the swell, because I think we've beat to death the driveway portion, then I agree with wanting the workshop. I do like the fact that we do have new staff members here that are very informative and are helpful, and the residents participating, because that's always good. And then I think right after that, they can simply present the portion that was already there and the rest that comes out of the workshop.
Would you be able to?
I'm sorry, Commissioner Samara, did you need to be recognized?
Yeah, would this be able to be brought back to the March meeting, or is that too soon? If we have a workshop.
I think this is really basically just discussing what came out of the original workshop.
That's
So I
right.
think,
No.
yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
I could do it tomorrow night. It's not a matter of any time I need for prep.
Commissioner Wise?
Yeah, that's what I figured. You had the experience and the institutional knowledge to come
Yeah.
back and just give us a list. And if we use this as a starting point, I think we heard some comments around swale that aren't entirely addressed here, and so we can build from what was developed in 2014 off of your specific insights from that swale conversation.
Okay, so I'm going to...
Okay, a problem that I'm also going to have, and I hope that, they come back with some good things that this commission doesn't do like the past commissions do and completely put their own agenda in and change it. So if we're going to ask them to come back and do this, let's be sure that we don't
I just
change
want to
our inputs.
Vice Mayor?
I just want to interject, Commissioner Samaria. I appreciate the comment, but I think it's clear, because I'm certainly, if I'm going to say something, I'm going to ask someone to do something, I'm not playing lip service, and it's the reason why I'm asking. I really, once and for all, want to hear what came out of this workshop. I understand that the pieces of paper or the notices have been passed around, but it's like I want once and for all congealed someone to tell me, this is what came out, this is where everybody was on board, and I can be confident to move forward.
No.
I want it solidified, and that's what I'm saying.
No,
I'm not playing lip service.
I'm not saying you're playing lip service. I'm just saying that they worked hard on this in 2014, okay? And I read this, and this is, with some tweets, should have been adopted, and it wasn't by other commissioners.
So just so that instead of having consensus, I'm going to ask for motion. Is there a motion to go ahead and I guess we need a motion to have a workshop? We need a motion for a workshop. Attorney? Is that be a better way to handle it? Okay.
Yes,
Okay.
It would be appropriate to make a motion to have a workshop.
Okay, thank you. Is there a motion to have a workshop with the presentation from the Code Review Board regarding the results from 2014, and then followed by a workshop narrowing down the scope of the swale, and then that's all. That's my motion.
My agenda, I should make it, yes, I make that a motion. But I also want to find out in reference to, and I want the attorney to explain.
Okay, can we please stick to the motion first? Is there a motion to do so?
I make the motion.
Okay, so let me rephrase. Thank you.
Code review does not exist.
Let me just ask a question. Mr. Kuehl, who was the chair of the Code Board? Was it Gage?
It was Gage.
Okay, so presumably, if we could, with Mr. Kuehl working with Mr. Gage, could you, with Gage Hartung, Mr. Hartung, could you create that presentation for us? Sure. Okay, thank you. So with that, is there a motion to have the Code Review Board spearheaded by Mr. Hartung and Chair Hartung, former Chair Hartung, or I don't think the vote was ever dismantled, so Chair Hartung and Mr. Kuehl to give a presentation to us, and then followed by a workshop with the community on moving forward with the swale portion of the driveway ordinance?
Yes, and I'd like to have it to where it's done for our next March meeting.
Okay, let's start with just the motion.
Okay, I'll make the motion.
Is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor? Aye. Okay. Mr. Spray, you want to, why don't, can
One of
we,
the items, I want to, if the attorney can explain about canceling workshops. I want
okay, we're not, that's another separate item. We're going to stick to what's on the agenda, please. Mr. Manners, would you get back with us for a date? I know you're working on the code date. I know you have 3 workshops now. So there's the code, the branding, and then there's also the specific swale.
And I'll address 2 of them later in the manager's report.
Thank you very much. All right, so next item. Decorum discussion. Commissioner Samaria.
I want to make it perfectly sure that everybody understands that the residents have the right to speak and vent their pros and cons on how the commission is doing their job, especially since this is the only way that they can communicate with the residents. The reason I brought this up was residents have come to me complaining about the behavior at the January meeting from residents and commissioners. A resident has sent to me, which we already know who sent it, and sent it also to other commissioners suggesting to revise the decorum. After reading the statements is directly at the residents and commissioners, the original statement has been on the agenda since 2012, the original decorum. I don't know who put that on and how that was put on there. My question is what caused to go on the agenda, who suggested it, who wrote it, and who approved it. As far as I know, it was never approved by the commission, and I wanted the decorum to be approved by the commission. I like Ms. Dillon's one because it basically talks about not only the residents but also of this commission, that we need to treat the residents with respect, the same thing as the residents need to treat the commission with respect. And I think that this commission also needs to approve this decorum, whether or not we want it. Because it's not on, if we're going to tell people to leave this meeting and it has not been approved by the commission on the agenda, like in Dade County has been approved. This one has never been approved by any commission.
Are you making a motion to approve this?
Yeah, to approve this, the new one.
The new one.
If everybody had a chance to read
Okay.
it because it was sent to everybody.
Then there's a motion on the floor to approve the amended decorum rules by Commissioner Samaria, written by Linda Dillon.
Just 1 second. One of the residents had...
If there's a motion on the floor, when there's a motion on the floor, I then have to ask if there's a second. Is there a second for that motion?
No second.
No.
First, I think we need to discuss it before the motion even gets put on the floor.
Okay, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Because I don't have an issue with decorum, and I think it should be balanced. It should be mutual. But the problem that I have is that we can have these decorum, if us approving it or ratifying it or whatever allows something to happen, because I've sat here in this commission and I try to be respectful. Obviously, you want the people in the audience to also be respectful, but that sometimes seems to just go by the wayside and then nothing happens. So I don't want to just talk about decorum rules. I hope that, I wish we didn't even need them in place and we could all just treat each other civilly. As I've always said, we don't always have to agree, but that's what discourse is. But we can be respectful when we speak to each other on either side of this table. The reason why I just wanted to discuss some things, because the reading of the language, I'm just wondering how it works, because since I understand what Linda was doing when making it more mutual, but I'm just want to discuss maybe the neutrality of the language, because if we say any person making impertinent, slanderous remarks be barred from further participation, is that a commissioner as well, and does the commission then have to vote to allow that commissioner to participate? So I'm just being technical with the language. It's the concept I accept. I'm just looking at the technical language.
Madam Mayor, I'd like to follow on.
Commissioner Wise?
Commissioner Sodell, if I may. And just to follow on, and I think that it opens up a can of worms if we start parsing language right here at the dais right now, and to summarily approve it without doing so, I think is irresponsible. I also would like to propose, or just to mention, that we do have an opportunity coming up in March to work together, residents, administration, commissioner, everyone working together in a brand work session to define the core values of this village and to come up with a mission and vision and some direction for this village. And for example, if we were to choose compassion as one of our core values, that would directly inform the language of our decorum statement. And with that lens, with those decisions made about what are the fundamental underpinnings of who we are and what we stand for and what we're going to do, I think addressing issues like this will have so much more clarity and consensus than if we just right here in this moment start trying to pick it apart and wordsmith it and come up with something that works. Just because this is my discipline and I've seen it work again and again, to have everybody come together and feel really united by a brand foundation, a core set of values that will inform so many of the decisions we make them easier, make them impartial, and make them consistent. And so I would just like to suggest that we table big decisions like these for when we have clarified those fundamentals.
I have, just a moment, please, because I would like to speak, and then we'll go back to Commissioner Samaria. One of the issues I have with the rewriting of the language is this has been vetted by Miami-Dade County. I believe this was taken under Manager Shafran. I believe that's what the language is. The only difference in the language is the first statement. Okay? I had nothing to do with making these decorum rules. They showed up on, and we've been using them ever since. For sake of legality, and I may ask the attorney to weigh in here, it may be pertinent, although we're going to wait to do it, it may be pertinent now just to have it in place until we finish doing that workshop. And I do not want to play the game of wordsmithing and doing attorney, and it's the same like writing code on the dais. I just don't think it's appropriate. So what I would like to see is I'd like to see us adopt these decorum rules as written, come back to the workshop, and if they need to be then changed, go for it and do it then. At least we have something in place that we've ratified. Because if we haven't ratified these, it does make it kind of problematic. And the other piece I wanted to say to everybody in the audience, I believe everybody in the village should have to be able to say anything whether they agree or disagree. But I would ask that the audience, when you make deliberate misrepresentations of the facts, when you make allegations that are factually on basis, and you do that continually, it makes it very difficult to listen to the same thing being brought up back and forth when it's not necessarily accurate at all. And when it's done for political reasons and it isn't done for the betterment of the village, it does make it difficult, and also to run meetings. But I think you know that because many of you who have done some of this are very experienced, more so than most of us sitting up here on the commission. So that is my personal thing, is keep the decorum rules equal for both. I do believe there should be respect on both sides. I concur with what Commissioner Tudor has said on 2 occasions, what the Vice Mayor has said, and as well as most of the commissioners up here. Commissioner Samaria.
The present decorum that we have now basically says the residents. It doesn't hold the commission or anybody on the commission accountable. At least this one says everyone that has to be accountable. If you think that commissioners should not be held accountable, then you're in for a big surprise. Because if you're going to stand there and criticize the residents for doing stuff wrong or for saying stuff, then you have to hold the commission the same thing. The new one does not say that.
Attorney Herron.
With respect to the issue of whether or not the actual decorum statement has been approved by a prior commission, I cannot tell you yes or no right now. I'd have to get with the clerk and research that issue. What I do know, because it's been provided to each and every one of you as recently as a month and a half ago, is that there's a resolution that this council, this commission approved that talks about civility. And it's very similar to the decorum statement. It talks that everyone will treat everyone with civility, etc. That has been adopted.
So
in a
that
resolution.
that essentially is already in a resolution.
Whether or not someone took that and then fashioned the decorum statement, or someone obtained the decorum statement from, because I've seen from another jurisdiction. I don't know. We can look into that. But at the end of the day, you all can it's within your power to modify, revise, amend, and then readopt or a decorum statement if that's the desire, and there's a belief that there needs to be a vote by this body to adopt it and to include it on your agenda. Nothing wrong with that, and it's up to you all to decide how you want it to read.
Okay. Commissioner Smara, did you want to make a motion?
I want to make a motion that we accept this. Unless this commission can explain to me what's wrong with the rewrite. What? No,
Well,
seriously.
Commissioner Samarian, I don't mean to be confrontatious. My only comment was just that there's some language that if I read it and I read it literally can be problematic. I've already stated my agreement with you that it should be mutual and we should be treating each other civilly, but I want to just have a well-written statement as the decorum statement. We have a resolution that says that we need to treat each other civilly, so I don't think that if I disagree with submitting this statement right now, I'm acquiescing and I'm saying that I should disrespect the residents. That's the complete opposite of what I'm saying. I'm saying that I want a decorum statement that is well written, that when people read it, it's clear as to what we're standing for.
Okay.
For both residents and the commission. I would take exception that if I disagree that you're making the statement that I'm saying that we're supposed to be treating the residents poorly.
I asked the commission's bear with me on it. Since Linda was the one President Linda is the one that brought that up, I'd like to hear from her.
With all due respect, it's 10 o'clock. I want to be respectful of the residents' time and our time.
I mean, you put my agenda items way at the bottom, so I mean, I don't got time to present it. I haven't been getting a chance to be speaking on my own two agendas here. Both of you hijacked both of my agenda items. So I really didn't get a chance to speak on it. Okay, just.
I find that really disrespectful, Commissioner Samaria.
Yeah.
We're all up here doing our best with the village's best interests at
You guys
heart.
started talking about my
Commissioner Sarah, you allowed one person on the floor at a time, please. Thank you. Commissioner West.
You asked that it be opened for discussion. We weren't going to summarily approve it, and so the request that we open it for discussion, we were not hijacking your recommendation. And I think we've all given very rational, impartial reasons as to why we're not ready to make a change at the dais right now, and to accuse us of anything otherwise is, ironically, a little bit disrespectful.
So if you're not going to make any changes, that means if you're not going to put this on, you're talking about putting the original one on, you're going to prove it tonight, right? Because if you're not going to prove it tonight, then you can't be reading it before each meeting.
Okay. I concur with that. So is there a motion to, we can always change it, but is there a motion now to ratify, just to make sure we've ratified it in case we have not, is there a motion to ratify the decorum as written currently on the agenda?
As written currently.
As written currently on the agenda.
I will make a motion to ratify the decorum rules as written currently on the agenda.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
All those in favor? Aye. All those opposed?
No.
Okay. Motion passes 3-1. Coastal.
Good night, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you for coming, everyone. The last item for discussion is 12H. Mayor Trutman, it's a clean energy corridor, coastal corridor. I'm going to have the manager just to address it, even though it's my item, since he's aware of the process. Go ahead, sir. 12H. Manager didn't hear me.
I'm sorry.
I was going to have you introduce the corridor, the Green Clean Energy Coastal Corridor Board. You received an email, correct, sir, requesting...
We did. We received an email from them. Former Ross was our representative to the board, and they're requesting that now that she is no longer a commissioner,
Okay, and I had asked that I be considered for that based upon my background. And with the commission's support, I'll be happy to be that representative.
I'd like to make a motion to approve Mayor Trutman and the manager to take the position on the Clean Energy Coastal Corridor Board.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Motion passes 4-0. Okay, request for replacement of items on the next agenda's meeting. I just want to kind of state that I will be looking at a variety of issues to make sure we have a wonderful new finance company that's been helping us keep track of things. And I may be working with I'd like to work with the manager and the finance manager for I'm going to bring you together an item that makes sure that there's full transparency to the community of how we're spending our money, where we are, and more real-time accountability for that, and processes in place to make sure that the commission is kept apprised of all of that. Not because our manager doesn't already, but I'd like to formalize the process that he has been doing, and I thank him for that. That will be one of the items. Anybody else?
I just had one comment, not to bring up a dead issue, but when we do go forward with the brand workshop where we're looking at our values, I do think this would be a great opportunity. The decorum rules, as drafted by Ms. Dillon, would be great content for us to use as an exercise once we define a set of values, to look at that writing through the lens of those values and make any adjustments that we might make working off of something that she's put time and effort into. I would be honored to include that in the work session if that's something that you would be comfortable with. Ms. Dillon, you can let me know offline.
And I wanted to apologize because you did send me the email. I asked Mr. Manager, I said I hadn't received it, and I actually found it. So my apologies, I just didn't see it. That was an oversight on my part.
Why not?
I don't care whether you adopt what I had suggested or not. I just find the decorum that you all just voted tonight to accept to be very offensive and harsh. And I would have preferred you just remove it altogether until something better could have been developed.
Can I ask a question? How long has that been in place, those decorum rules?
Okay, how many years since, Ms. Sheffrin?
No, it's been put on since 2012.
It popped up about
2012.
Yeah,
okay, I'm sorry, but that was 6 years. It's been on for 6 years is a long time. I'm not challenging whether or not it's harsh. I'm just saying sometimes things just get left in place because if it ain't broke, don't fix it. If what's being pointed out now is that it's broke and we should fix it, then I'm saying this is a great place to start, and let's use that as fodder for our branding work session to help us define who we want to be as individuals and as a village.
Commissioner, if you just asked to be recognized, it would be a little helpful, so I just thought that. But no, you're all recognized. Go right ahead, sir.
If this would have been kept in the back of the place where it was originally at, I don't think we would have had a problem. When we moved this to the front, that's when this problem started to happen. If it would have been kept in the back, nobody really would have, been recognized or paying attention to it.
Vice Mayor.
Right, I mean, but it's there, and if anyone's reading it, they would have the same thoughts. And again, I'll say it again, I agree with you, Linda, that it's one-sided, it's harsh. My only point is that it's just not an easy thing to do, is to go through and make sure wording is right or whatever. It's like I'd like to just do it once, have something that is fair, something that people will appreciate and follow, they won't ignore, they won't disrespect. And maybe if there is a workshop where we're discussing this, one, it's also reinforced even more. It's not just black and white. It's not just ink on a page that people might ignore. So I almost welcome the discussion to flesh this out and talk about it and have it be in the forefront of people's minds.
In all fairness, none of us sitting up here wrote these decorum rules. I'm not suggesting that I enjoy reading them. That was what was voted on. I don't enjoy having to say those things either. I would like us to be more, I think everybody's conclusion is we'd all like us to be more respectful, have solution-oriented discussions that are constructive, and I think that's the direction we all need to move in. That's all. And I don't disagree with what you're saying about the way they're written, but they are here now, and we can always adopt them and change them, sure.
Well, can we move that back to the back? where it should have been.
We already voted on that, and there's a rule that says once we voted on something, let me...
I didn't vote to vote on
Commissioner
this.
Samara, please. Once we voted for something, it can't be brought up, I'm not mistaken, legally attorney, for another 6 months. So you can bring it back up.
No,
Unfortunately, we
I'm
can't
talking-
bring it up. No, we've already voted on it last meeting, and we cannot bring it up. It's the law every 6 months.
I'm talking about the decorum that you have in the front. Can it be put back where it was originally in the back?
We just voted on it last meeting, and there's...
No, I didn't
Attorney Herron, did you want to... Go ahead.
No,
Well-
no.
And then and then I'd like to move on to your report after that, sir.
You know, there is no magic to one way or the other. I understand the discussion that you all are having. I was just very quickly looking at, because I know another municipality in this county that had similar concerns and similar issues, and I just brought theirs. They actually have theirs in the code. That's how far they felt that they needed to go. It's in Palmetto Bay, that also has lengthy discussions, and there's an entire code section
but
on
my
decorum.
but my question to you wasn't that. My question specifically was, and the manager, I know you know this as well, is it was a very narrow question. It was, when something is voted on, you can't bring it up the next commission meeting. I think we have an ordinance that says it takes 6 months to be able to bring it back, those items.
The rules are that unless there's a majority vote to bring something back, that no, it moves on. You move on, and that's it. That the answer to your question is, unless there's a majority vote at the same meeting to bring something back, you move on.
Now, that's not the question. You're still not listening to what I'm saying. The decorum that you have in the front of the agenda was in the back, between city manager and you, moved it to the front.
And
I'm
then there was a
asking-
vote.
And it was not a vote. I did not vote on that.
Okay,
I don't know.
you vote against it. You voted against it. It was a 3-1 vote. You voted against
There
it.
was a vote at the last meeting to leave it at its current location.
And to read it, so, and I think it's something, there's two items.
read it part, I
Village-
remember.
May I ask the village clerk just to chime in, because I know she spends her life listening to these things.
To move to the front, stay on the front, read it, and post on the podium.
And post on the podium. I couldn't remember the other one. So that was voted on, and you did vote against it, sir. Okay. Village attorney, reports?
Nothing.
Village manager?
Just quickly, the code workshop, I just want to make certain that we're all available on the 12th. That would be next Tuesday at 7 p.m. to do the code workshop that you want to do.
I'm available.
Yes.
Yes.
Just wanted to make sure.
This is the code workshop that we had voted on last time. There are some extra pieces that need to be looked at, including construction and some other issues that the staff has put together a list, I believe, and I had some issues as well. And so,
Okay. So everyone currently?
The 12th.
It will interfere with my conjugal visit, but yes, I am available.
okay, now your comedian side is coming on in.
I'm just saying.
Okay. Thank you for the brevity. The 12th.
Next Tuesday night.
Okay. And do we want to do that at 7 p.m. or 6:30?
7 is
7?
always
7.
better for...
Can you check with Commissioner Tudor on that as well?
I will. Yeah.
We had sent out a date to everyone for 319. That didn't work, so we're now working at 326.
I'll make it work. How's that? I don't even know.
326?
Yes.
What time? 7 p.m.? And
That's fine.
okay. And then we had another one for the swale. One more.
We might as well do that while
We're here.
Okay.
Pick a date.
In February, right? The swales in February.
Branding is on the set 326 at 7 p.m. The code review is on 212 at 7 p.m. And we have one more. Swales.
Swales should be in February.
The dates that are available in February, inside The 14th is bad for one commissioner.
It's bad for all commissioners. It's Valentine's Day.
What about the
Just saying.
Wednesday, the 20th, that seems to be...
No good for me. I'll be in court in New York.
What about the 19th?
Let's see, and then there's Tuesday, the 26th of February.
No.
that was March.
March. So 2/26 at 7 p.m. Is
That's fine.
I'll make it work.
That's Swale, correct?
Swell, correct.
26th. Done.
Fantastic. Village manager, anything else?
Not a thing.
Board committee reports, none. We already had them. Any comments by commissioners? I just want to make one, if I may, and that is I want to thank everybody again for coming out. There was a very large crowd this evening. I also want to thank Linda Dillon for her input, and I want to thank everybody who came to the driveway workshop as well. And last but not least, I want to really thank the chief and the commander for their incredible report, Paul Winklejohn and GMS for what they did on the finance report, and last but not least, our brand new, hardworking, very hardworking Public Works manager for doing such a good job. Thank you all very much. That's it.
Thank you.
Any other comments from commissioners?
No.
Okay, announcements, please. That's right, no clapping, please. I don't throw anybody out.
What kind of clapping?
Okay, we're not done yet. You have to sit down. Sorry, she's dying. Announcements, please. Almost.
Okay.
Can I eat
On
your hand?
Monday, February 11, 2019, 7 p.m., Code Compliance Board. Monday, February 11, 2019, 7 p.m., Biscayne Park Foundation. Wednesday, February 13, 2019, 6 p.m., Public Art Advisory Board. Tuesday, February 19, 2019, 6:30 p.m., Planning and Zoning, Advisory Board. Thursday, February 21st, 2019, 7 p.m., Parks and Parkway Advisory Board. Wednesday, February 27, 2019, 7 p.m., Public Safety Advisory Board. Monday, March 4th, 2019, 6:30 p.m., Planning and Zoning Advisory Board. Our next regular commission meeting will be held on Tuesday, March 5th, 2019, at 7 p.m. The third annual art show will be on February 9, 2019, from 2 to 6 p.m. at Log Cabin. And on February 18, 2018, all village departments will be closed due to President's Day.
Okay, one last. I know you announced it, but I want to give a shout out to the entire community. Amy Raymond and the Art Board has done an incredible job putting together a phenomenal event, which is going to be from 2 to 6 p.m. at the Log Cabin. There will be almost 40 vendors here, so I'm really hoping the community will come out and support this event. There's been 6 months in the planning, and I know it's going to be a great day for all of us. Thank you. Is there a motion to adjourn?
I'll make a motion to adjourn the meeting.
I will second it.
All righty. All those in favor?
Aye.
Meeting adjourned.